Julia, Bride's Dock on Portum Island, Book 3. Written by Debbie Civil. Narrated by Bethany Kay. Prologue. Kendrick Carter brushed his wavy black hair from his forehead, cursing the day he challenged his barber to a poker game. After wiping Lester Adams out, the sore loser tried to scrap with Kendrick every chance he got. Kendrick could take a man. He was 6'6" and 275 pounds and had muscles thanks to his time in the gym. The problem with Lester Adams was that he didn't like a fair fight. He had 6 other brothers who were just as cowardly. That meant that they only fought in a pack. When a pack was trying to rip a man's head off, a woman was often sent in the other direction. So not only was Kendrick desperately in need of a haircut, he was also longing for female company. In any case, when he entered the building that held the matchmaker's office, he wasn't looking his best. Since the business was a startup, the office assigned to Cassandra and her partner Lance wasn't large, only holding an open area with 2 desks and a bathroom. Cassandra's desk was by the door. She had been typing on a laptop when Kendrick entered. "Hi, Mr. Carter," Cassandra greeted, her smile wide. "Please, Cassie, stop with that. Call me Kendrick," Kendrick pleaded, cringing at his friend's stiff words. Cassandra typed something on her computer before gesturing at the chair in front of her desk. "Please sit," she directed. Kendrick plopped down on the plush chair in front of Cassandra's desk. Lance's desk was an eyesore, the mountain of papers and empty water bottles covering it, killing the look of the place. Lance was obviously not the neatest individual. He hoped that in time, the young man's habits would change. "So, Kendrick, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Please be as honest as possible," Cassandra encouraged, before taking a deep breath. "What are your hobbies? Playing poker, fishing, riding horses? I don't know, can eating be a hobby?" "Sure. Are you a good cook?" Cassandra wanted to know. "I'm decent enough. I can follow a recipe, but I'm no gourmet chef." "Do you eat the fish you catch?" Cassandra wondered. "Of course. Why fish if you aren't going to eat what you catch?" Kendrick asked. Cassandra nodded and typed something on her keyboard. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how neat is your home?" "Let's see. I don't make my bed because, seriously, why bother making a bed if you're going to sleep in it at night? But the rest of my house is clean. So I'd give myself a 9.5, Kendrick decided. He refused to rate himself any lower, lest he was matched with a slob. "I'd say that you are an 8, Cassandra figured. Kendrick agreed, knowing that the matchmaker's score was high enough to suit his needs. "Do you snore?" she asked. "Dunno, but I am a light sleeper," Kendrick noted. Cassandra continued the line of questioning for an hour. After Kendrick's interview was completed, the matchmaker closed the lid of her laptop. She rubbed her forehead, the stress of starting a new business obviously getting to her. "The website has been live for a week. I'm going to send out my first round of matchmaking kits tomorrow. Hopefully your match will be in that bunch. Kendrick, I'm unsure of how long it will take to find her, but I will," the matchmaker assured him. "To be honest, I'm just looking for a companion that isn't annoying and loves children. Jill and I need help at the orphanage," Kendrick bluntly said. Kendrick was used to being with others since he had grown up in the orphanage in town. The orphanage was for the kids who weren't claimed by relatives after their parents died. His adoptive parents had run the orphanage until they had been killed in a boating accident 10 years ago. He supposed it would have been nice to have a family of his own. His directness hadn't won any points with the ladies, and so Kendrick had to admit that this matchmaking service was his only hope. "Okay, I will keep that in mind," Cassandra replied. "Thanks," he said before getting to his feet. He might as well head to the orphanage to see if his sister Jill needed anything. Kendrick exited the office building and was immediately attacked by the sun's rays. He wished that he hadn't forgotten his sunglasses at home. He blinked a few times before stepping onto the sidewalk. The door of the gym that was across the street flew open and Lester Adams swaggered out, followed by his brother Joe. The Adams brothers had a similar look: golden blonde hair, blue eyes, and slender builds. Could the council deport them from Portum Island? A lot of the single men wouldn't protest. His sister Jill referred to the Adams men as scoundrels. She read way too many historical romance novels. Kendrick had a better name for those men: punks. Most of the inhabitants were the peaceful sort, but a few bad apples poisoned the well, bringing the worst out of a reasonable person. That's why Kendrick waited for the men to approach him. "Kendrick, just the man I wanted to see," Lester said, the hostility in his gaze letting Kendrick know that this wasn't going to be a productive conversation. He sized up the two men, his confidence growing. Lester closed the distance between them, and Kendrick responded by making a fist. Joe, the brother beside Lester, paled. He was probably regretting the fact that more of them hadn't come along. "Take it easy, Ken. I just wanted to come to you as a friend." "Really?" Kendrick asked, the doubt evident on his face. "That game from 2 weeks ago wasn't a serious one. All you have to do is transfer the $250,000 back to my account and—" "Too bad. I spent it already," Kendrick announced. Lester's cheeks turned red, his rage wafting off of him. "On what?" he roared. "The orphanage. If you want, I can tell Jill that the donation was from your generous family," Kendrick offered. Lester looked as if he was dying to clobber him, but a short woman with long brown hair hustled over to the punks. Kendrick recognized Diana Adams, the domineering matriarch of the Adams family. She stepped in between Lester and Kendrick, her back to the sun. Diana was clad in a silk short-sleeved blue dress and matching sandals with rhinestones. This woman oozed self-importance, which annoyed Kendrick. "Gentlemen," she asked, a brow arched, "I had no idea that you associated with one another." Of course. Kendrick's adoptive parents were benevolent but not very wealthy. Pearl and Michael Carter put their heart, souls, and finances into caring for abandoned children. They oftentimes adopted the children that couldn't be placed with a family. That was why Kendrick had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Most of his siblings moved across the island and started new lives free of the orphanage. At least they made donations, no matter how small some of them were. However, the elite of Portum Island rarely interacted with the children in need, which was a shame. "We don't. We were just asking where donations could be made," Lester lied. Diana smiled at her son. "Great. I'll be sure to send Jill a check. Now come along, boys," Diana ordered before ushering the punks away. Chapter 1. Julia Lang stood at the entrance to the attic that she called home. It was dusty, cold, and damp. Frustration filled her at the thought that it would be her home for the foreseeable future. She was 21 years old, and she was still stuck living with her Aunt Meena and her Uncle Jeff. They were slumlords that charged her half of her paycheck for room and board alone. Another quarter of her paycheck went to utilities, and the last quarter could be used for whatever she wanted. Her parents died long ago, victims of a robbery gone wrong. Julia had been adopted by her aunt and uncle, and she was raised in New Jersey. She had been earning her keep as soon as she was old enough to use a duster. "Julia," her cousin Ruby called. Julia sighed and descended the attic stairs, her aching legs carrying her down to the second floor. Ruby was a rambunctious 15-year-old who enjoyed defying authority. That was ironic since Ruby loved giving orders. The pajama-clad, gangly teen held out a vial. "Spit. It's for a project I'm working on," she ordered. That sounded easy enough. At least she hadn't told Julia to cook her a midnight meal or do her homework like her other cousin Melissa did. Julia took the vial and spat in it before handing it back. "What class? Do you need help with the paper?" Julia instinctively inquired in case her Aunt Meena was eavesdropping. "Do I look stupid to you?" Ruby demanded. "I don't need help with my homework." That was refreshing. Unlike Melissa, Ruby was attractive, with long jet black hair, brown eyes, and olive skin. She favored shorts and tank tops while in the house, and she wore yoga pants and t-shirts when she was forced to be in public. Aunt Meena was trying to break her of such habits, but Julia doubted that her cousin could be told to be someone else. "Okay, let me know if you do," Julia said before turning on her heel and hurrying up the stairs that led to her cramped abode. Julia snatched the flashlight that hung on the door and turned it on. The electricity in the attic had gone haywire years ago. Aunt Meena offered to call an electrician if Julia was willing to pay for it. Julia declined and so endured the cold winters and stifling hot summers. Julia turned on the flashlight, which illuminated the room. It wasn't much with the 2 duffel bags that were stuffed with her clothes, a cot, and a desk that held Melissa's schoolbooks, and the latest edition, the iPhone that she was strapped with. 2 weeks ago, Ruby had convinced her parents that Julia would serve them better if they invested in a means to make it easier to communicate with her. Melissa's failing grades had bolstered her cousin's argument. Melissa's heart was set on law, but she didn't grasp the material that the professors lectured on, and so Julia had to read the brat's textbooks, take notes, and explain complicated theories to the woman. From what Julia heard, Melissa was now averaging a B+ in her pre-law classes, which meant that the tactic was working, but Julia knew that things were only going to get harder for her cousin. "I'll probably have to move in with her when she goes to law school to get her through it," Julia muttered to herself before sliding under the thin blankets. She shut the flashlight off and fell into a fitful sleep. The preset weekly alarm on the phone woke her the next morning. Julia stood, lamenting the fact that she could only take 2 showers per week. The sweat from her job was making her smell rank, despite the baby wipes and deodorant that she used. She changed into a clean t-shirt and jeans before slipping on her Chucks. Then Julia popped a piece of mint-flavored gum into her mouth. She couldn't brush her teeth until everybody else had. She hated the taste of morning breath. After snatching up the iPhone, she tiptoed down the steps and went into the kitchen. Ruby was already sitting at the kitchen table, eating a bowl of cereal. A flash of panic nearly made Julia's heart stop. If any of the children were caught serving themselves, Julia would lose food privileges for a week. That had already occurred a month ago, and the thought of a repeat filled her with dread. "Ruby, I was supposed to get that for you," Julia softly lectured. "How do you feel about marriage?" Ruby inquired after waving a dismissive hand in the air. Of course, her cousin could be nonchalant since she had never been starved before. "What about it?" Julia asked as she began washing the dishes that someone used overnight. Sometimes Jeff woke Julia up whenever he needed a midnight snack. She was thankful that he had gotten this one himself. She washed the plate, knife, and cup before storing them in the empty dish strainer. Julia next fetched a frying pan out of the cabinet under the scuffed countertop. "Don't you want to get the hell out of here? You can't live in my parents' attic forever," Ruby pointed out. Leaving had been the plan until her savings had been wiped out by Jeff. He had stolen her bank card and withdrew $3,000. Julia had never figured out how he had gotten a hold of her PIN number. Of course, Julia quietly said. Great. So what kind of husband are you looking for? I peg you for wanting the strong and protective type of guy, the opposite of my father. He's a wimp who does everything my mother says. The utter disgust in Ruby's voice made Julia spin around. She shot her cousin a pleading look. Don't let your parents hear you say things like that. Melissa is the favorite because she plays the game, Julia lectured. Out of everyone, Ruby was the least demanding, though Julia could hardly call the teenager sweet. If Ruby had different parents, maybe she would have been. Yeah, well, I don't have to worry about them. When I turn 18, I'm going to enlist in the military. I don't need their money for that, she declared. Ruby, your mother wants you to be a doctor, and my mother wants you to be a slave forever. Trust me, Julia, Footsteps pounding down the stairs made Ruby frown. Moments later, Jeff entered the kitchen, his belly leading the way. He wore a t-shirt and his boxers. His thinning blonde hair had streaks of gray, and his eyes had bags under them. Coffee now, Jeff ordered as he retrieved the container of muffins from the fridge. Julia turned on the coffee pot, the scent of the drink that Americans enjoyed each day filling the kitchen. It irked her that she was good enough to make the coffee, but not worthy enough to drink it. She was stuck eating granola bars since she was never allowed to consume the food that her aunt and uncle bought. Who ate the muffins? Uncle Jeff demanded. Don't know, Ruby replied in a distracted tone. There is only one left, the man whined. Uncle Jeff went into the pantry and returned with the box of her granola bars. There's only one granola bar left. Julia, you need to keep up with the grocery shopping, Jeff remarked, before pulling it out and dropping the box in the trash. Anger suffused Julia, and all she wanted to do was bash the coffee pot over his head. But the knowledge that she'd be homeless prevented her from doing so. Ruby let out a sigh. Dad, do you really need the granola bar? Julia is making us breakfast, Ruby rebuked. Shut up, kid. You don't pay the bills yet, Jeff said. Well, he had eaten Julia's last granola bar. Great. She would be starving until she got paid. Julia sighed and began making the members of her family breakfast. She wondered as she made the eggs, bacon, pancakes, and toasted bread if she'd ever get out of the horrid situation. Breakfast smells all right, Julia's Aunt Meena commented as she strolled into the room. She was dressed in a black skirt and white button-down top. She had Julia's golden brown skin and dark eyes, but the rest of her was blocky. Meena had broad shoulders, big breasts, and childbearing hips. Julia didn't cook fast enough for my tastes, her Uncle Jeff complained. She needn't want to produce food fast enough for you, Ruby commented, which made Meena grin. Cruelty always made that woman smile. It was like she thrived on it. Our daughter has a point, Jeff, Meena said as she sat beside Ruby at the table. It was already set. All Julia had to do was portion out the food. Is Melissa joining us for breakfast? Julia inquired. No. Now serve my oh-so-fat and hungry husband the food, Meena ordered. Judging by the flush on Jeff's face, he hated being called fat. Julia served the food and then sat at the end of the table and watched as they ate. So, Ruby, next year you're going to science camp, Meena announced. It does you no good to sit around for the entire summer. Fine, I'll go, Ruby readily agreed. Anything to get out of this boring house. Julia, take Ruby to the library today. I think I want her to brush up on some biology. You'll know what to pick out, Meena instructed. It was scorching hot outside. and Julia's shower slot was 2 days away. But she couldn't refuse. "Yes, Aunt Meena," Julia responded. "Why aren't you eating a granola bar?" Meena wondered. "Because Dad ate them all," Ruby replied. "Well, that's a lesson for you, Julia. Hide your food better," her aunt said before shoving a piece of bacon into her mouth. Chapter 2. Kendrick was ringing up the last of his customers when he saw a familiar raven-haired beauty stroll into the processing center. Could it be? He thought to himself. Play it cool, man. Maybe she's picking up her groceries. Kendrick's heart pounded when Cassandra made a beeline for his station. "Hey, Kendrick," Cassandra greeted, an excited gleam in her eyes. "Cassandra, please tell me you got some good news for me," Kendrick pleaded. "Yes, your bride is coming," she announced. "How much do I owe you?" Kendrick wondered, hoping that the fee wouldn't drain his savings. "Since you are a guinea pig, the council is paying my fee," she explained. "Great. So, what's her name?" Kendrick asked. "Julia Lang. And yes, she knows how to cook and loves children," Cassandra confirmed before he could voice the question. "When will she arrive?" Kendrick inquired. "This weekend," Cassandra said. "She will be arriving with Asher and Thomas's brides." Kendrick was happy to hear that his neighbor was getting a bride as well. Thomas was misunderstood, but he was one of the kindest men in all of Portum Island. If it weren't for Thomas and his overwhelming support, Kendrick would have been in no position to send for a bride. "That's wonderful. I hope our wives are friends," Kendrick said. "So that your bride can rope the others into helping with the orphanage?" Cassandra guessed, amusement in her dark eyes. "You are one sharp woman, Cassandra Hall," Kendrick declared. She smiled and said her goodbyes. Kendrick Carter was going to have a wife. Jill would hopefully accept the unconventional way that he went about finding someone to marry. "Damon, you can't have a cookie!" Kendrick heard his sister shout as he entered the grand lobby of the orphanage. The 5-story building looked more like a hotel. A past generous benefactor had built the sanctuary for orphaned children. Kendrick recalled his years in the building with fondness. Yes, he shared a room and wore hand-me-downs, but his brothers and sisters had been close. He eyed Jill, who had her hands on her hips. Damon, the troublemaker, was standing there, the stubbornness in his expression letting Kendrick know that there was about to be trouble. "Hey, Jill," he greeted. His sister was a short, curvy blonde with peaches and cream skin. Her ocean-colored eyes were filled with exhaustion. Unlike Kendrick, whose poor parents had died, she was left on the orphanage steps as a baby. Though the island was small, it wasn't small enough for people to know who the baby belonged to. Some of the citizens lived in isolation. "Ken, what's going on?" she asked, curious. "Aside from the fact that I'm getting married?" Kendrick said, his entire face lighting up. Damon, who was on the verge of throwing a tantrum, peered up at Kendrick with confusion. "I thought you said that women were too much trouble to date," Damon challenged. "Well, Cassandra Hall, the new matchmaker in town, found someone for me. Her name is Julia," Kendrick revealed with enthusiasm. "So you're going to marry a stranger?" Jill asked, perplexed. She didn't seem thrilled by the prospect, but he knew that his baby sister would come around. "Think about it, Jill. There are more men on this island than women. How else would I have found a wife?" he asked. Jill winced because she was reminded on a daily basis that Portum Island lacked women. Kendrick stiffened. "Did an ineligible bachelor bother you again, Jill?" Kendrick referred to the losers that flocked to his sister. "No, it's fine, Ken," she told her brother. Liar, Damon injected. I had to chase Jose off with a crab. He talked about sleeping with Miss Jill, which makes no sense. It was daytime and... Have the cookie, Jill frantically said. Damon shot his sister an evil grin and ran in the direction of the kitchen. Why didn't he offer you a date first? Kendrick wondered, disgust rolling in his stomach. His words? You have to ride a horse before you buy it, Jill reported before groaning. I can't believe he said that crap in front of the kids. Let's talk about Jose later. You are getting a wife. Are you serious? What made you do it? The council is paying for Cassandra's fee, Kendrick honestly said, which made Jill chuckle. You never can resist a bargain. Did you tell Sal? She inquired. He might be jealous. Not yet, Kendrick replied, feeling fortunate that his older brother believed that people should make their own decisions. But no, you are the first in my family that I've told. Are you having an actual wedding? I'd like to be there. I can ask Cassandra if she could bring my lovely bride here, Kendrick figured. Are there any spare rooms open? We have one double. That might work, Jill responded, excitement lighting up her eyes. Get in touch with Cassandra and let me know. I can make this a formal event. That would mean a lot to me, Kendrick admitted. Great. Don't forget to invite our other siblings, she reminded him. I will, but I doubt that everyone will show up. Kendrick whistled as he walked home. He pictured holding the hand of a wife while he made the trip. He imagined what it would be like to have a woman to eat meals with, go to bed with, and to have a family with. His adoptive parents died 10 years ago. The shock of their loss still burned deep in his soul. But what he remembered was the example they set. They were best friends that valued one another. Would they approve of him sending for a bride? Kendrick was saddened by the fact that they weren't around to answer the question. He found his best bud Thomas standing in his front yard. The poor guy was still in his suit. Hey, Tom, Kendrick shouted. Kendrick, Thomas Daly said, a smile stretching across his face. He walked over to him and shook hands with him. I see the smile. I presume that Cassandra has spoken to you? Thomas asked. She has indeed, Kendrick responded. I have been getting my home prepared for my bride. Hopefully she isn't a shrew like Linda, Thomas said with a wince. I hope not. If she is, I'm shipping her back, Kendrick joked. The contract states that we can't ship them back. Their marriage to us provides them citizenship on Portum Island, and Kendrick held up a hand. Thomas, don't get caught up in the details. Just enjoy having a companion, Kendrick coached. Don't worry, my man. You will not want to ship your bride back. The creaking of a step made Julia's eyes fly open. She rubbed her face, hating that the windowless room lacked natural light. She was about to get to her feet when a flashlight appeared. Damn, it stinks in here, Ruby complained as she aimed the beam around the area. Perfect, you are all packed. For what? Julia asked, confused. Come on, you need to get dressed, Ruby urged. Julia hated that she had to take orders from a girl who was 6 years younger than her. But if Ruby reported any disobedience on her part, she could be beaten. That had only happened a few times, but it was an unpleasant memory that made her shiver. On instinct, she pulled clean clothes out of her duffel bag, glad that yesterday had been laundry day. She changed into jeans and a t-shirt and stepped into a pair of flip-flops. Grab your duffel and follow me. Be quiet, Ruby hissed. Julia snatched up the bag designated for clean clothes and followed her baby cousin down the attic stairs. She was surprised when she led her down the stairs and outside into the cool morning. Julia shivered as her cousin grabbed her arm and forced her to start walking. "Where are we going?" Julia asked as they passed the neighbor's house. "Julia, I heard Mom talking. She's thinking of selling out your services," Ruby reported. "She's in a lot of debt. I guess she likes to buy expensive jewelry. And by the way, my dad stole the money you saved at the bank. He's friends with one of the tellers and they cashed out your account to pay some bills. Dad is going to demand 90% of your paycheck. You'll never get out of here," Ruby explained. "That's why I came up with a plan." "A plan?" Julia asked through a tight throat. All of the money that she had earned was gone. A tear threatened to fall as Ruby continued to speak. "My friend Brandy and I came up with a plan. We were doing some research and found a small mail-order bride agency. That's why I had you spit into that vial and asked you all of those questions about your likes and dislikes. I applied on your behalf and they found a match for you. I pretended to be you on the phone, which is no big deal because we sound alike. Your matchmaking coordinator is Cassandra Hall. Someone will pick you up and bring you to the airport. You are going somewhere off the coast of Florida. I'll wait to tell Mom that you're missing." Julia sighed. "I already made the coffee and breakfast, so they won't know the difference." Chapter 3. Julia sat on the top step of the stairs that led to the town library. Her duffel bag rested beside her. Ruby was long gone, which meant that Julia could run away and... "Oh, please, I have nowhere to go and no money to my name," she thought to herself. So her only options were to return to a life that included serving others, be homeless, or take a chance at this mail-order bride agency. She supposed that moving somewhere new would be the best option. Thanks to the crooked banking system, Julia had nothing. She hoped that there was an exciting new life waiting for her off the coast of Florida. Julia waited for what had to be a couple of hours. She didn't have a watch and Ruby had insisted on taking her cell phone, but eventually a sleek black car pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out and sent a smile her way. "Julia Lang?" he asked. "Yes," she said, her heart rate nearly through the roof. Julia stood and allowed her bag to be dumped into the truck. The driver opened the door for her and Julia slid into the back, surprised by the buttery soft feeling of the leather seat. She didn't relax until her eyes landed on the first sign for the airport. Julia wasn't sure how to act. She timidly stepped onto the plane, unsure of why she had listened to Ruby. A tall, beautiful woman named Cassandra introduced herself, and she took her seat. Julia had never flown before, but she figured all would be well. Her aunt and uncle would never fly out to Florida to drag her back, and so she was at her new husband's mercy. She was knocked out of her musing when a beautiful redhead sat beside her. Julia suddenly felt self-conscious, the knowledge that she hadn't bathed in a couple of days getting to her. "Okay, so I can look out the window and pretend like I don't want to talk. Then I won't have to see her wrinkle her nose," Julia figured. "I'm Tessa," the stranger beside her said. Her smile seemed friendly enough, so Julia responded. "I'm Julia. How are you today?" Julia spoke to Tessa as if she were one of the customers at the grocery store. "Freaking fantastic for someone that's about to marry a stranger," Tessa said, her exuberance making Julia shift uncomfortably in her seat. The redhead was friendly enough, but Julia wasn't sure that they could be friends. Julia was much too boring for someone like her. "So you and Tessa know each other?" Cassandra asked as soon as the plane was in the air. Julia felt kind of left out since she hadn't been formally acquainted with anyone in their group, but she reminded herself that no one knew her Aunt Meena, which meant that the evil woman had no chance of discovering her whereabouts. Yes, she used to be one of my customers. I gave her a trim a couple of weeks ago, Esperanza responded. I see, Cassandra said. So what part of Florida are we going to? Tessa asked, which made Julia perk up. Ruby didn't really have any answers for her. We're going to an island off the coast of Florida, Cassandra said. Julia recognized a vague answer when she heard it, but it wasn't like she could do much about it. I know, that's what you told me on the phone. I just want to know what island we are going to, Tessa said, insistent. Hold up, what part of Florida are we going to? Esperanza cautiously asked. We are landing on a private airstrip in Key West, Cassandra said. Then we are taking a boat to Portum Island. Portum Island, Julia squeaked. There is no such thing. It is an island, Cassandra protested. Trust me, I grew up there. Wait until you see it for yourself. Great, Tessa squealed. There was nothing great about this situation, but Julia didn't say anything else. She was concerned that angering the matchmaker would have severe consequences. What if Cassandra punished Julia by giving her a less than desirable husband? I can't wait to see this island, Julia shared Tessa's sentiment. She wanted to know if her situation would improve. What do you think our husbands will be like? Julia hesitantly asked Tessa. Maybe the redhead had the inside scoop. Look, Julia, your husband will be plenty nice to you, Tessa confidently told Julia. I hope that where we're going is a lot of food, Julia said after a moment of silence. Tessa giggled. Hours later, Julia's mood and the condition of her stomach shifted. She sat on the deck of a yacht with the group that she had left New Jersey with. Unaccustomed to the luxury, Julia's worries slipped away. Besides, she was chowing down on a delicious tuna fish sandwich. Tessa sat beside her, her green eyes bouncing from place to place. So why aren't there any men on the yacht? Tessa bluntly asked. Cassandra sighed. So, Portum Island is a real place? But the island is picky? Most people can't even enter the island. That's why when we created the mail-order bride business, we included the DNA kit as a requirement. Unfortunately, the island rejects people. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Julia knew that she was supposed to care about what Cassandra said, but the sandwich was too good. Besides, if Cassandra was proven wrong, Julia wasn't going to be the one that confronted her. Esperanza seemed irritated enough for the rest of them. Get ready. You'll feel electricity in a second. Moments later, the air grew warmer, and Julia felt static electricity brush against her skin, as if someone had accidentally shocked her. She instinctively finished the food, thinking that she'd rather face something on a full stomach. Julia let out a scream when everything went black. She heard Tessa screaming as well. Julia furiously blinked, desperate to see light again. What was happening? Julia had little time in the void as the darkness abruptly disappeared, revealing the bright sunlight. Julia relaxed as she studied the island, thinking that she might be happy there. There were carts labeled with the name of each of the brides waiting for them on the dock. Julia loaded her duffel into the cart, feeling embarrassed that she didn't have much with her. She was assigned to travel with Sadie, the woman that owned the yacht. Ready to go? Sadie inquired, a smile on her face. Yes, Julia responded. Since people on Portum Island weren't permitted to drive cars, Sadie and Julia walked for half a mile before reaching the island proper. Julia stared at the beautiful homes, bustling businesses, and the people riding horses or bicycles in the streets. She tried to imagine riding a horse, but couldn't. So your husband Kendrick decided that you should meet each other at the orphanage that he runs with his siblings. He figured you could get married there, spend the night, and then go home, Sadie informed Julia. Kendrick helps run an orphanage. Would I be expected to help? Julia wasn't sure if she loved children, but she was a good cook and could clean if she had to. Probably. Would that be a problem? Sadie wondered. Julia had the sense that if she said no, there would be consequences. I'll do what I can, Julia assured Sadie. What does Kendrick do for a living? He works at a processing center. It's where we can pick up anything that we ordered online, like groceries or clothes, she explained as they reached a building that resembled a hotel. Here we are. You aren't going in with me? Julia asked uneasily. Of course, I'll introduce you to Kendrick and... One of the glass doors flew open and a tall man with caramel skin, bulging muscles, and dark brown eyes ran out into the sunlight. The wide smile on his face tugged at Julia's heart. Hey, Sadie, he greeted. Kendrick, this is your mail-order bride, Julia, Sadie said. Nice to meet you, Julia. You're kinda early, but I don't mind. Want to freshen up before the wedding? The Reverend isn't here yet, Kendrick informed Julia, whose mouth dropped open with surprise. I'm going to shower every day? She asked, excitement beginning to fill her stomach. Sadie frowned. Julia, why do you think that you wouldn't be able to shower every day? Sadie questioned. Look, I'm sorry, I said something wrong. Forget what I said. It's okay, Sadie, I can take it from here, Kendrick assured. Sadie nodded. I wish you the best of luck, Julia, she said. Thanks, you too, Julia replied before taking her duffel bag from the cart and following Kendrick inside. The waiting room was empty, which made Julia sigh in relief. She knew that she didn't smell like daisies. Kendrick led her into the elevator and took her up to the 5th floor. He led her to a carpeted hallway and opened the room on the end. Julia entered a bedroom with a plush carpet, 2 double beds, a dresser, and a closet. Her eyes lit up when she spotted the ensuite bathroom. Help yourself, Kendrick said, and Julia darted to the bathroom without hesitation. Chapter 4. Kendrick's heart nearly broke as soon as his bride ran into the bathroom. She had been mistreated in some way. He knew it by the delight she showed at the thought of taking a shower. He spun on his heels and wasn't surprised to find Jill in the doorway, excitement lighting up her eyes. Molly's with the kids. Where is she? Jill asked, the anticipation lingering in her eyes. Kendrick rubbed his forehead, not wanting to explain his suspicions to his kind-hearted sister. I think that Julia went through something, he hesitantly confessed. Jill sighed. If she's awful in any way, I will not be forced to accept her, she warned. Before Kendrick could respond, he heard the squeak of the bathroom door. Kendrick turned to face his bride, assuming that she had a question, and froze. Julia's eyes were wide with horror. Is that your bride? Julia accused, her finger pointing at Jill. Kendrick could understand her assumption since the siblings looked nothing alike. But he was too focused on the sight of his bride in a towel to answer. Jill let out a groan. No, I'm his sister Jill. We are adopted. Kendrick stopped staring. Jill yelled. His eyes jerked up to meet Julia's. Sorry, Jill is my nosy younger sister. We were both orphans here. My parents adopted us both. Kendrick quickly added. Did you need something? I was wondering if I could use the shampoo, conditioner, and soap in the bathroom? Julia's voice cracked and her mesmerizing dark eyes were concentrating at a spot on the carpet. I hate to cause trouble. Why did that question infuriate Kendrick? Who in the hell didn't allow her to use shampoo or conditioner? And why did Julia look at a shower as a treat? Was she poor, homeless, or maybe the pipes to her bathroom were broken? Of course, Julia, you can feel free to use anything in the bathroom, Kendrick insisted. She nodded and closed the door behind her. Jill whacked Kendrick on the shoulder before glaring at him. Really? You had to ogle the poor woman? Anyway, the kids are excited to meet Julia. The food is ready, and the Reverend should be here in 2 hours. Do you think we should eat before or after the wedding? Kendrick was convinced that his emaciated bride hadn't eaten in days. She was all skin and bones, and that meant that he had to fatten her up. But he didn't want to give her rich foods that could upset her stomach. Maybe we can offer her a nutrition bar and see how she takes that? Kendrick hesitantly responded. Jill nodded and left the room. 5 minutes later, Julia exited wearing a threadbare sundress and flip-flops. Her dark hair was wet and tangled. Kendrick had the feeling that she didn't even own a hairbrush. Sit down, Kendrick said, gesturing to one of the beds. Julia complied without hesitation. He exited the room and fished a brush, comb, and hair products from the supply closet, and returned to his beautiful bride. Julia still sat on the bed, her arms wrapped around her. She was afraid. Julia, are you hungry? Kendrick asked as he began combing her long dark hair. It was down to her waist and had split ends. He knew that from a hair lesson that his elder sister Leslie had forced on him before she moved across the island. I can comb my own hair. I would hate for you to go through trouble for me, she said in a timid voice. Kendrick continued combing her hair. It's not trouble, he gently told Julia, as Jill rushed into the room carrying a dress. Hi, Julia, I'm Jill, in case you forgot, Jill said before strolling into the room, a ball gown tossed over her shoulder. Can you please try on this dress when Kendrick finishes with your hair? Yes, Julia said as Jill laid out the teal-colored gown that Diana Adams had donated 5 years ago. Since none of the orphans went to high society events, no one claimed the dress. Great, Jill said as she deposited sandals on the floor in front of Julia. These sandals are a loan. Kaylee made me promise that you would take good care of them. I will, Julia said, though she sounded afraid. Before Kendrick could reassure his bride, Leslie and Sal barged into the room. Is this her? Leslie, a vibrant brunette, demanded. Move, I'll work with her hair. Kendrick handed Leslie the comb and his sister gestured to the door. Sorry, brother, that's code for get out of here, Sal teased as he dragged Kendrick out of the room. Julia had no idea what to make of her new and strange predicament. A redhead that introduced herself as Leslie combed, then cut her dark hair to the middle of her back. Then Jill painted and clipped her finger and toenails. That was followed by light makeup, deodorant, and lotion. You can keep all of these things, Jill told her. Really? Julia couldn't help but ask. What is the catch? Aunt Meena had taught Julia a valuable lesson. Don't accept generosity without knowing what the terms were. Julia, look, why don't you tell us how things were where you lived? Leslie suggested. It would help us understand you better. Julia allowed the women to assist her with getting into the gown. She had never worn anything so nice before. Well, I lived with my aunt and uncle. My parents died when I was a baby. Things were interesting. Aunt Meena had rules. I could only shower twice a week, could only brush my teeth 3 times a week, and couldn't eat any of the family's food. As soon as I turned 14, I started working. She took half of my paycheck as rent, and I tried to save, but my uncle was friends with a teller at the bank I used. He would take money out of my account every time I saved enough to leave. Julia forced herself to admit. Jill wiped a tear from her eye as Leslie patted her on the back. "Have you ever told anyone about what happened?" Leslie asked. "I told you guys," Julia responded with a shrug. "So they stole your money and limited your time spent cleansing. What other rules did they have?" Jill wanted to know. Julia sighed. "They had me cooking and cleaning their meals. I also did all of Melissa's homework. She's in pre-law, and it's difficult for her." Julia noted pleasure filling her gut at the idea. She wished that she could see how Melissa reacted when she realized that her 5-page paper still needed to be done. "So they just let you go?" Leslie asked in disbelief. "No, my cousin Ruby heard that they were going to take 90% of my paycheck. So she applied for this mail-order bride program on my behalf. I had no idea I was getting married until earlier today," Julia confessed as Cassandra entered the room. "Ladies, are you ready to go?" she inquired. "Cassandra, Yes," Julia said, interrupting Leslie. She didn't want to go back to New Jersey and spend another night in that dark attic when she could have Kendrick for a lifetime. Something about the way he carried himself drew her. He seemed nice enough. "Great. Julia, you look beautiful," Cassandra said. "Thank you," the bride replied as she followed the matchmaker out into the hallway. The 4 women rode the elevator to the first floor. Julia was led into a little chapel that was across from the reception desk. Everyone stood when they caught sight of her, and a preteen began playing a flawless rendition of Here Comes the Bride on the piano. As the 3 women that had walked in with Julia took their places in pews, Julia walked down an aisle that had a runner strewn with flower petals. Kendrick wore a gray suit and was wearing a broad grin. Julia had never dreamed that she'd ever walk down the aisle toward a man. But thanks to Ruby's devious nature, there she was, accepting Kendrick and the new life he offered. She reached the tall, broad-shouldered man, and he took her hand and turned her to face the audience. A reverend with salt and pepper hair conducted the ceremony. In between his short sermon and the vow, a few of the orphans sang a beautiful song. Kendrick had purchased an engagement ring for Julia, along with a wedding band. As both were slipped on her finger, Julia recalled Ruby's ring-size project. "I pronounce you husband and wife. Kendrick, kiss the bride." "Wait, what?" Julia was going to protest, but Kendrick gently cupped her face, his kind eyes putting her at ease. He gently pressed a warm kiss to Julia's lips, and she swore that soft kiss branded her soul. Now that she was married, Julia knew that she had to call her aunt to let her know that she had left to marry Kendrick. It was the only way that the heat would be off of Ruby. Her cousin may not have been the nicest person to her, but the kid had come through when it mattered. "Kendrick?" Julia softly said as they walked up the aisle. "Can I borrow your phone?" "Is there something wrong, Julia?" he gently asked. "No, my aunt and uncle will have been looking for me by now. I need to tell them that I'm not coming back," she said. Kendrick nodded and led her over to a section in the back of the chapel. "Let's sign the marriage license first," he told her. Julia happily signed her name on the dotted line, because it meant that her aunt could never drag her back to Jersey. Chapter 5. Kendrick led Julia into the bedroom where she had gotten ready for the wedding. She sat on one of the beds, her heart pounding. He handed her the phone and she dialed the number. "Hello?" her aunt asked, sounding agitated. Julia wanted to hang up, but she knew that she had to protect Ruby. Aunt Meena, it's me, Julia. Where in the hell are you? Aunt Meena shouted. Melissa's dinner party is tonight. Figures that she'd be concerned about her precious daughter. You know you will have to compensate us. We had to order breakfast and lunch. You don't think. You are stupid. I'm not coming back, Julia said, forcing herself to speak loudly. I just got married. I'm in Florida. I decided not to tell you until after the wedding. Julia was shocked when her aunt hung up, but she was relieved. At least Aunt Meena didn't see fit to yell and threaten, which was her usual MO. In any case, Ruby was now out of the crossfire, which was the point of the call. Julia handed her husband back his phone and stood. What's next on the agenda? She asked Kendrick. He grabbed her hand and smiled down at her. My sister put together a reception for us. I gave the kids something to do, he said. I shall escort you into the dining room. The dining room happened to be right next to the chapel. As soon as they entered, the orphans began taking pictures of the couple. The dining room consisted of rows of tables that sat 6 apiece. Jill directed them to a table that held Jill, Sal, Leslie, and Cassandra. Took you long enough to come in, I'm starving. A boy who couldn't be more than 7 shouted from the next table over. Damon, if you don't apologize to Kendrick and Julia, I will make sure that you eat last, Jill threatened. Sorry, Miss Jill, Damon responded. Jill rubbed her forehead. Julia, this is what you have married into, Leslie teased. Julia glanced around the room that held 18 children, 5 toddlers, and 3 babies. It didn't seem like an entirely terrible place to be. At least she was making a difference. It's better than where I lived before, the bride commented. Enough of that, Jill said. Table leaders, each of you grab a platter, Jill ordered, and a group of teens went to the buffet table and each grabbed a stack of platters. Sal collected food for their table. I'm sorry that this isn't a grand feast, but it's tasty, Jill said, before lifting the lid off of the first platter, which consisted of chicken legs. The next platter was filled with broccoli, while the third had macaroni and cheese. The snack bar that Leslie had given Julia earlier wasn't enough to sate her. The adults and kids alike passed around the platters, and the group waited until everyone had taken their fill until they ate. Julia was unused to the rich food, so she couldn't eat much of it, but she took slow bites, hoping that Jill wouldn't get too upset. Kendrick, when do you plan on giving Julia a tour of her new home? Cassandra inquired. Either today or Monday. I don't have a set plan, Kendrick informed her. Because you're a man, Leslie sniped. Julia, I'm guessing that you need a few things, Leslie assumed. Like what? Julia inquired, before taking another tentative bite of the chicken to delay from explaining that Ruby sent her with no money. Like bathing suits, sunscreen, razors, new dresses, some aprons for when you're helping out here, Leslie listed. Julia doesn't have to help out at the orphanage if she doesn't want to, Kendrick said. Of course she does. Why else is she here? Leslie argued. To be my wife. If she wants to help out here, it would be awesome. But I don't want to force Julia to do anything that she doesn't want to do, Kendrick said, which made Julia relax. She could cook if Jill needed it, but interacting with those kids felt scary. I don't mind cooking, Julia offered. We have a full-time cook, but we do need someone to help with the new babies, Jill offered. Julia had assisted with changing Ruby's diapers and feeding her. She couldn't say if she enjoyed the prospect, but she had to earn her keep somehow. Of course, I'd love to help, Julia responded, and Jill nodded. Do you really, though? Leslie challenged. It's okay to say no to my bossy sister. Jill has been so kind to me. The least I can do is help out with the nursery. Now, what do I need to do? Julia wondered. Sit with the babies for a couple of hours a day, Jill offered. I'm running the school for the orphanage since they can't register in public school. Why not? Julia inquired, puzzled. Because orphans are not allowed to go to public school. There isn't a rule against it. It's sort of an unwritten rule, Leslie responded. What my sister is trying to say is there is no way the high society women would allow our kids to mingle with theirs, Jill informed her. High society? Julia asked, confused. Jill made it sound like lords and ladies were strutting around Portum Island with peasants obeying their every whim. She means the rich and stuck-up ladies, the ones that own the most businesses and lead their husbands by the balls, Sal responded, which made Jill glare. Sal, the children are here, she hissed. They aren't listening, Sal argued. I see. Who are some of the high society ladies? I'd like to avoid them, Julia said. Some of them are nice, Jill assured. In fact, Kendrick is best friends with Asher Lawson. Asher's mother is one of our benefactors. In fact, she visits the children once a month and holds a common etiquette class. Catherine Lawson is low high society. She isn't as popular as Rose Blackhawk or Diana Adams. Lester Adams, Kendrick groaned. That brood is horrible. If you didn't insist on provoking them, they would leave you alone, Leslie snorted, which caught Julia's interest. What's wrong with the Adams family? Julia wanted to know. Let's see. There are 7 boys and 2 delusional parents who think that their sons could do no wrong. They tend to travel in packs. They never start a confrontation unless they have backup. Just last week, 2 of them approached me. I sort of beat them at poker so that I could put money into the orphanage. We do have benefactors, but it's nice to have a little extra cash, Kendrick explained before a buzzer sounded. Crap, Jill said. I think that we're getting a new arrival. Julia and Kendrick, why don't you come with me? Julia figured that Jill had some sort of agenda. Why else would she ask Julia to come along? Kendrick stood and gently took her hand. He intertwined their fingers, which made butterflies dance in her stomach. There was something about Kendrick that was beginning to fascinate her. Jill led them out into the lobby and gestured for the couple to wait. She opened the door and returned with a swaddled child. Julia gasped when she saw how filthy the blanket was. Who is the baby? Julia cautiously asked. She didn't want to overstep, but that poor creature seemed so alone. Jill peered down at the baby, a tear traveling down her cheek. Let's see if there is a note, Jill said before gently laying the baby on the reception desk. She carefully unearthed a note from the dirty blanket. Dear Orphanage, her name is Layla. I don't want her. I can't be a mother. Take good care of her. Jill read the note in a stiff tone, as if she had read something like this too many times. Julia eyed Layla, and her heart ached for the baby, who had a crown of dark hair. What will happen to Layla? Julia inquired. We'll clean her up and feed her. I'll give it a few months before featuring her in the catalog, Jill explained. For the first time, Julia thought of the work that she would be doing at the orphanage. She may not be a people person, but she would do what it took to help the children. Come on, Julia, let's go back to the reception, Kendrick insisted. Jill can take care of baby Layla. She nodded, and Kendrick whisked her back to the wedding reception. The evening went by in a blur. After a beautiful cake was cut, the tables were pushed aside, and the kids all danced for hours. Before she knew it, bedtime for the children below 10 approached. The older children herded the younger children to their beds, while Kendrick led Julia back to the room that they would share for the night. Chapter 6. Julia stretched, not eager to get out of bed, but the sunlight was streaming into the room, so she figured that she had slept long enough. She slid out of the bed and eyed the area. Kendrick wasn't in the room, which made her stomach sink. Would Jill think less of her for sleeping so long? There was no changing the past. Julia decided to take another shower since the water pressure in the bathroom was wonderful. After indulging for a few minutes, she changed into a pair of shorts and a t-shirt before poking her head out of the room. Kendrick stood there, a wide grin on his face. "Hey, sleepyhead, you're up," he cheered. "I figured that the sleep would be good for you. How are you feeling?" "Refreshed," Julia answered honestly. "Great. How would you like to go out to eat before heading home?" The abrupt way that they were leaving the orphanage gave Julia the feeling that something was wrong. "Okay. Let me grab my duffel bag," Julia offered. "Do you have groceries? I can make us something." "Yes," he responded. "What's the rush?" Julia curiously asked. Kendrick rubbed his eyes. "Leslie invited my Aunt Rosa over for lunch. She wants Jill to sell the building," Kendrick quickly explained. "I obviously don't agree. To get us, she tends to do really annoying things. I'm worried that she'll attack you. And I definitely don't think that you're up for that," Kendrick figured, which made Julia frown. "You said I had choices, right?" Julia cautiously inquired. "Of course, Julia. You always have a choice," Kendrick insisted. "Then I think we should stay. I'd much rather deal with your Aunt Rosa now. What if she shows up while you're at work? Then I'll be stuck dealing with a woman that I don't know how to handle," Julia said, her eyes trained on the floor. "Damn it, Julia, why didn't you just do what Kendrick wanted? You know what happened when you disobey." The memory of being trapped in a broom closet for 2 days with no food, no water, and the stench of her own waste made Julia's throat close up. She began to sweat, though the central air was blowing on her skin. A gentle hand lifted her chin. Julia's eyes blinked open and her eyes connected with Kendrick's kind gaze. "What happened when you disagreed with your aunt and uncle?" he cautiously asked. "Closet. They would lock me in a closet for 2 days." Saying the words caused discomfort to swirl in her chest. Kendrick gently kissed Julia's brow before pulling away. "Sweetheart, if you want to stay for a while, we will," Kendrick softly said. "Then we can go home and you can relax." "What will you do?" Julia asked. "I'll probably go for a walk. If you're up for it, you can come too," he said before tenderly kissing Julia's lips. The kiss felt great, and all she wanted was more. On instinct, Julia's arms wrapped around Kendrick's neck, and she allowed his mouth to move over hers. For a couple of moments, the kissing was innocent. Then Kendrick eagerly parted her lips with his tongue. His taste was sweet. He must have had some sort of berry-flavored drink before retrieving her. "Sorry to interrupt the honeymoon. It's good to see that you guys are getting along," Leslie said, which made Julia leap away from her husband. She covered her face for a moment before reminding herself that Leslie was the rude one. The woman hadn't bothered knocking. Julia faced Kendrick's sister and eyed the woman, who had a wide smile on her face. "You could have knocked," Kendrick scolded. "You know Rosa hates waiting around for people. Come on, breakfast is just about to start," Leslie urged. Kendrick wanted to strangle his sister. He had been making progress with Julia. She had barged in and possibly ruined all of it. His wife stood in the corner of the elevator as far away from him as she could get. Leslie shot Julia a disapproving glance, which made her shift from foot to foot. "You know, if you act like this in front of the children, they will run all over you," Leslie commented. "Julia's helping out with the infants," Kendrick responded as the elevator doors slid open. Julia can speak for herself. She doesn't need you as her mouthpiece. Leslie shot back before strolling out of the elevator. Kendrick grabbed Julia's hand as they followed behind the redhead. The children were already at their assigned seats when Kendrick and his wife entered. Aunt Rosa was seated where Cassandra had been for their wedding reception. Julia and Kendrick took their seats, and the brunette, who oftentimes annoyed the hell out of him, scowled. "Kendrick, it's rude to keep me waiting," Rosa lectured. His mother's younger sister was tall, with long, straight black hair and skin tanned from days in her garden. Her dark eyes were hard when they landed on Julia. "And who is this mouse that you married, and why does it look like she hasn't eaten in years?" his aunt demanded. Before Kendrick could say anything, Julia stood. Liking this turn of events, Kendrick got to his feet as well. "Kendrick says that I have choices. I choose not to associate with anyone that's cruel. I've had enough of that with my aunt and uncle," Julia announced. To Kendrick's amusement, the children started standing one by one. "I won't deal with her either," Damon shouted. "She's mean for no reason." "I want to leave, Kendrick," Julia admitted, and her husband nodded. "Can I walk you guys home?" Leslie asked. "Of course, but it's out of your way. Are you sure about that?" Kendrick asked. "I am pretty sure," Leslie said with an amused expression on her face. "Besides, I want to see what changes you made for your bride, and I can make a few suggestions if needed." "I guess so," Kendrick said as Sal ran past them, being chased by two teenage girls with makeup brushes. "Who brought those girls makeup?" Kendrick wondered. "I did. I think all women deserve a bit of blush and mascara," Leslie defended. Kendrick let out a sigh before taking Julia's hand and leading her to the exit. Chapter 7. Julia's eyes lit up as soon as she walked through the front door of her new home. It was warm, smelled like pumpkin freshener, and didn't have a speck of dirt. Leslie, however, seemed unimpressed by her surroundings. Leslie seemed unenthusiastic by what she saw. "Maybe you can hire a landscaper. Your grass and bushes don't look green enough," Kendrick's sister criticized. Julia disagreed, but figured that it was best to keep her opinions to herself. She had already pushed herself out of her comfort zone at breakfast. Julia doubted that her nerves could take any more. "Yeah, I'll add that to my list," Kendrick said, humor sparking in his eyes. Kendrick led the two women into the living room. Kendrick didn't have knickknacks covering the place, but the kitchen was spacious and had granite countertops. She spotted a coffee maker and a toaster oven, but not much else in the way of cooking appliances. The stove was clean in the way that said it was hardly ever used. She walked into the living room, which had a sectional that had two recliners as bookends. There was a coffee table that held a basket overflowing with candy and an entertainment system that boasted speakers that were up to Julia's waist and a massive big screen. Julia's eyes landed on the open cabinet that was filled with DVDs. "Do you host the children here?" Julia inquired. "He doesn't take his work home, Julia," Leslie answered as she plopped down in one of the recliners. Julia couldn't help but think that Leslie was nervous about something. "Helping out at the orphanage isn't work," Kendrick protested. "You're right. You actually get paid for work," Leslie sneered. "Is that why you aren't helping out, Leslie? You're not willing to put in the effort for free?" Kendrick demanded. He seemed annoyed, but Julia sensed that Leslie didn't care about his mood. She obviously had something to say. "Look, Kendrick, James Finn and I have decided to sell our share of the building. The new owner owns half of the orphanage. He plans to begin construction next month. We both know that you and Jill will have no choice but to let them buy you out. You don't need all of that space for 25 children. Our buyer will provide a building more suitable to an orphanage. We get money and a new place to live, and everything will be all right. Rosa is waiting to sell until she sees the accommodations for the children. I, for one, think that. Kendrick didn't say a word. He simply stood and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Leslie paled, her eyes filling with tears. Julia stood, her anger boiling her blood. Those were children who had been thrown out by families who didn't want them, and all this woman could think about was money? She knew that she didn't have a place in this family, but the words that had been stuck inside for what seemed like 21 years just had to come out. I don't get it. You saw those kids and how happy they were, and you were going to take that away from them for money? Julia demanded. Shut up, Julia. This is none of your business, Leslie shot back. Leslie did have a point. She hardly knew Kendrick, so she had no facts to use to defend him. But this was her new home, which meant that she had a say in who visited. Just leave, Julia ordered. Leslie stood and snatched up her handbag from the arm of the recliner. You're going to thank me. Wait until you have children and Ken won't be around for them because he is too busy taking care of orphans, she warned. If that day comes, you won't be around for it. I hope you're okay with losing him for good, Julia rebutted. Leslie flinched before storming out of the room. As soon as the door closed behind the selfish woman, Julia decided that she had to get to work. A warm meal may not fix Kendrick's problems, but comfort food would probably put a smile on his face. Kendrick walked for miles as if he could escape the problem. He needed time to mull over this predicament. Rosa was a potential sellout, but Sal and Jill would never consider it. If Rosa sold, the buyer would have the majority. Kendrick was sure that they would be kicked out of the building and sent to some small building off the beaten path. Then what would the lives of the orphans be reduced to? Would his parents be disappointed? The morning of their passing felt like it was yesterday. Jill, what do the kids want for dinner? Kendrick asked as he strolled into the kitchen. He wasn't thrilled about having kitchen duty, but his mother insisted that he had to learn how to cook. His favorite sister Jill was standing at the kitchen island coring apples for what had to be an apple crisp. Allison, one of the young children, adored apple crisp, and her birthday was the next day. Burgers, you and Sal fire up the old grill? Mom and Dad will be gone until sunset, so Leslie and James will have to help with tucking the kids in. Finn was 22 and already pulling away from the family. He had a beautiful wife named Lydia and a baby on the way. Kendrick's parents had offered their eldest son a place to stay at the orphanage, but Lydia refused. She didn't enjoy caring for a gaggle of children that weren't her own. That made no sense to Kendrick. Why marry a woman who didn't like children? Didn't he know of the legacy that his parents were creating for him? Since Finn was in his 20s, he had this know-it-all attitude that grated on everyone's nerves. He wasn't going to take any advice from Kendrick. Kendrick, grab the buns, James shouted as he strolled into the room. Kendrick sighed and glared at the man who was 6'6" and built like a tank. James had dark brown skin and dreadlocks that were touching his shoulders. He was 20 years old and didn't say much. On it, brother, Kendrick replied as he opened the industrial freezer. A sharp scream gave him pause. What's Leslie screaming about? Jill asked. No, Leslie wailed. That wasn't the sound of a 15-year-old whining about a new outfit that a 5-year-old shredded with scissors. That sounded like a girl who had lost everything. Kendrick closed the fridge and ran to his sister. Leslie was standing in the reception area with Aunt Rosa. Aunt Rosa was calm, but Leslie was collapsed in a chair, tears streaming down her face. What happened? Kendrick asked his aunt. They're dead, Leslie cried. Mom and Dad are dead. Kendrick shook himself out of that terrible memory. Instead, he wandered some more, hoping that the anger and grief would subside. Kendrick, a familiar voice called. Kendrick turned and saw his brother Finn. Finn was tall and thin with brown hair and olive skin. He actually had a look of concern on his face. How dare he look so concerned when he was one of the sources of Kendrick's rage? Kendrick punched Finn in the face, the move surprising them both. Kendrick's surprise turned to a sense of vengeance, and he longed to hit his foolish brother again. He swung, and a grip latched onto his arm. "Hey, easy," the man said. Kendrick blinked and saw Mr. Lawson holding onto his arm. He was wearing jean shorts and a t-shirt with his ice cream shop logo on it. "You both can solve this without hitting one another," Marcus's father lectured. "He sold his share to the building that houses the orphanage. How could he do that to my parents? They left us with a legacy and he spat on it. I have to do what's best for my family," was all Finn said. "Right, because your selfish wife comes before those orphans. I'm not stupid, Finn. I know that the sale was Lydia's idea." Finn winced. "Kendrick, I'm sorry that this hurt you, but the orphans will have somewhere to live." "That was a part of the deal. We're touring places tomorrow," Finn defended. "Right. The man who hasn't stepped foot in the orphanage for years is choosing a place for the orphans to live. Why not include Jill or Sal? At least they know what the orphans need. What do you know?" Finn sighed. "Look, Kendrick, I'm not the only one that's sold. Why not yell at James or Leslie?" "Why not admit that you were wrong?" Kendrick fired back. "Look, Kendrick, I sold. There isn't anything I can do about it now," he said. "Just try to understand our position." "I do understand your position. You guys knew you were in the wrong, so you sold behind our backs," he said. "Kendrick, why not head to the ice cream shop? I'll have a word with Finn," Mr. Lawson offered. Kendrick wanted to tell Asher's father to stop playing peacemaker, but he resisted. The man was doing the best that he could to keep Kendrick from strangling Finn. So he listened, thinking that a nice scoop of ice cream may cheer him up. It was as he made it 2 blocks that he thought of Julia. Sweet and gentle Julia was at his house, probably having an anxiety attack. After he cooled down, he had to check on his wife. Grant knew him well. Kendrick needed to think things through before he said any more. Chapter 8. Julia smiled as she pulled the lasagna from the oven. He had all of the ingredients, which told her that he either wanted her to make it or cooked it a lot. She paired the main dish with a side salad and apple crisp for dessert. She smiled as she set the table. Kendrick was upset. That was more than obvious. But he would come back sooner or later, right? On cue, her husband walked back into the house, his haunted eyes making her heart ache. "I'm sorry about what happened," Julia said. Kendrick opened his arms and she went into them. His embrace was warm and comforting. She rubbed his back as they stood together, nothing but the sound of the exhaust fan filling the air. Kendrick pulled away from her and kissed her forehead. "I smell something good," Kendrick commented. "I felt so bad and had no idea how to cheer you up, so I cooked. I made lasagna, salad, and apple crisp." Kendrick dramatically rubbed his stomach. "I can't wait to eat." His enthusiasm seemed sincere, which made Julia's heart warm. Whenever she cooked for her aunt and uncle, they never expressed anything positive. In fact, they always had complaints about how she did things. After the couple enjoyed the salad, Julia plated 2 plates of lasagna. She took a bite and her taste buds danced. "You've never tasted your own cooking before?" Kendrick guessed. "No, that was against the rules. I was to follow recipes and make any changes that Aunt Meena or Uncle Jeff suggested. It's weird being allowed to eat my own food." "Well, get used to it. You can eat whatever you want," Kendrick insisted. "Enough about my life. What are you going to do to fix this?" A sparkle filled Kendrick's eye. "I have no idea, Julia. There are 7 owners that have equal shares of the building. So far, Finn, James, and Leslie have sold. I know that Sal, Jill, and I will never sell. Rosa is our true wild card." "Who's the buyer?" Julia wondered before taking another bite. "I don't know. I was too mad to ask." Maybe if you find someone that you can trust that will buy them out, things will be all right, Julia figured. The only person that I know that has that kind of money is Marcus Lawson, my boss. A spark of hope began filling Julia's chest. If Marcus the boss were a good man, everything would be settled. Julia still couldn't believe that people would actually take away the home of children. She supposed that if one was desperate, then why not cash in? Either way, she hoped that this issue would be quickly resolved. Let's get our minds off of this, Kendrick suggested. Why not watch some TV? Excitement filled Julia at that prospect. After cooking and cleaning, she was sent back to the attic. The only TV that she ever got to enjoy was what she happened to catch a glimpse of while passing by the electronics section. I have no idea what I'm interested in, Julia admitted. That means we have to figure it out, Kendrick announced, excitement on his face. Julia got to her feet and followed her husband into the cozy living room. He turned on the television and patted the space beside him on the couch. She joined him and he wrapped an arm around her. Warmth filled her at the close contact. She snuggled into his side and he introduced her to a crime series that was fascinating. After a few episodes, he watched a basketball game, which put her to sleep. When she woke up, Julia was on the couch, a blanket resting over her. She sat up and yawned, the fatigue she was feeling catching her by surprise. She rubbed her eyes and strained her ears but didn't pick up any sounds of her husband. Figuring that she could make her way to the bedroom to start unpacking, Julia went upstairs and opened the first door on the left. Julia's eyes bulged at what she saw. Kendrick had his back to her, a towel wrapped around his waist. His bare skin was tantalizing, drops of water traveling from his neck to the towel. She hungrily took in his broad shoulders and let out a squeak when he turned around. Kendrick's brow rose when he eyed her. You like the show? He asked. Julia's throat became as dry as a drained lake as her heart rate began to gallop. She made eye contact with Kendrick, which was nearly her undoing. Kendrick strode over to her, his lips tipped up in a smile. His eyes traveled to her mouth, which made her suck in a breath. Julia leaned toward him, her lips eager for his touch. He sucked her bottom lip into his mouth, which ignited the desire in her body. Julia wrapped her arms around his neck and moaned into his mouth as he finally kissed her. The kiss was long and hot, his tongue taking charge of her mouth. All Julia could do was hold on as his kisses deepened. Her hands traveled down his spine as their mouths continued to dance. That move must have done something to Kendrick because the next thing Julia knew, she was on his bed, her back pressed into his mattress. Kendrick hovered over her, his hungry gaze making her stomach flip. She drowned in his eyes, her heart nearly bursting from the affection she was feeling. But despite the feelings, Julia wasn't ready to consummate her marriage. Before she could say a word, Kendrick's lips pressed to hers again, and she was lost. As they kissed, Kendrick managed to slide down her shorts and panties. Then he brought her over the edge with only his hands, and she did the same for him. Julia was startled awake the next morning when she heard the shower running. She sat up and rubbed her face. A blush played over her cheeks when the memory of the night before entered her brain. They hadn't gone all the way, but the sensual experience had profoundly changed Julia. For the first time since she arrived at Portum Island, she was understanding that Kendrick didn't see her as an object that he could control. It was evident in how he didn't push her into going to home base. He had taken his time with her, his kisses reaching her soul. But she hoped that Kendrick didn't discuss what they had done. That would be embarrassing. Kendrick strolled out of the bathroom and Julia smiled at him. I'll take my turn now, she told him before grabbing a towel and a change of clothes from one of the drawers and heading into the ensuite bathroom. After their passionate interlude, Julia had been able to unpack her meager belongings. Her drab clothing had reminded her that she could sew for the children in the orphanage. Meena had forced Julia to learn how to sew, knit, and crochet. Melissa went through a phase when she wanted all of her clothes to be made. Even so, Julia had enjoyed working with her hands. She had never been able to create clothing for herself, but she hoped she'd get the opportunity. After changing into shorts and a t-shirt and a pair of flip-flops, Julia joined Kendrick at the kitchen table. Her husband was munching on a bowl of cereal, which looked appetizing. Julia helped herself to cornflakes and milk and sat across from him. "I was hoping that you'd be open to buying me sewing, knitting, and crocheting supplies. I can make stuff for myself and the orphans," Julia blurted out. "You could order clothes as well," Kendrick suggested. "That would also be good. Where can I shop for things?" This was uncharted territory, but Kendrick did say that he wanted to treat her like a wife. "I'll show you how to order supplies after breakfast." "What about a job? Do you think that the processing center would hire me?" Kendrick's eyes lit up. "If you know how to sew, maybe you can apply for a job at one of the dress shops," he suggested. The thought of being around people made her throat nearly close up, but she reminded herself that she had done that before. It wasn't like Julia was afraid of people. She would just prefer to not work in retail. But she would do whatever it took to support her family. "Okay. My guess is that I'll have to sew a few things to impress the seamstress?" Julia inquired. "Doubt it. Women on this island hate to work. She'll probably hire you on the spot," Kendrick revealed. "I'll walk you to a new shop on my way to work." "Okay," Julia responded. She wasn't thrilled about meeting new people, but she would do what she had to do. Chapter 9. It was stifling hot by the time Kendrick led Julia to a dress shop called Lady Parker's Designs. It didn't seem busy, so Julia had no qualms about walking in. She was secretly pleased when her husband followed behind her. "Hi," a woman called from the back. Julia eyed the dresses that hung on various racks and was immediately drawn to the light-colored sundresses. She examined a pink dress that was significantly nicer than the threadbare clothes that she had on. Could Kendrick buy it for her? She eyed the price tag and swallowed. The dress cost $100. It was kind of pricey, but now that she was free to do whatever she wanted, that dress would be a buying goal. "Can I help you?" a woman asked. Julia released the dress and turned around. A short woman with skin the color of peanut butter stood there, her dark eyes filled with interest. "I came to see if you were hiring," Julia blurted out. "I have experience with sewing, knitting, and crocheting." "Kendrick, is this true?" the woman inquired. "Sure is. Shirley, this is my wife, Julia," he announced. "Awesome. I am so backed up. 5 women have come to me with wedding dress requests. If I work on those, you can work on my alteration projects?" Shirley asked, relief filling her face. "Yes," Julia said, her shoulders firm. "Great. Come back here at 1. I'll work with you side by side. I'll be keeping you until 7, she announced. "The pay is $20 an hour?" "I will be back," Julia said. Shirley cheered and pulled Julia into her arms for a hug. She relaxed and returned the hug, grateful that she might be able to avoid customers. After Shirley said her goodbyes, the couple left the shop. "Do you know Shirley well?" Julia inquired. "She grew up in the orphanage," Kendrick explained. "She just left a few years back." "Do you think that Leslie told your sister?" Julia wondered. To her surprise, Kendrick stopped walking and pulled her into his arms. His kiss was slow and hot, something that curled her toes. When he released her, he grinned. I just want to enjoy something really good before talking to my sister. I highly doubt that Leslie told Jill what she did, he said, disgust in his tone. I think you're right, Julia admitted, after she caught her breath. It was quite the kiss. I almost don't want to tell Jill until I figure something out, Kendrick confessed. You can't do that, Julia insisted. She will feel hurt if your other siblings accidentally tell her. Besides, when we got married, you promised me you let other people make their own choices. She reminded him. How does that apply to this situation? Kendrick asked, looking puzzled. By not telling Jill what's going on, you aren't giving her a choice, she told her husband, who promptly kissed her lips. Aren't you a smart one? Kendrick teased. I try to be, Julia joked. Kendrick sighed, grabbed her hand, then escorted her to the orphanage. You're here, Jill cheered. Kendrick smiled as he entered the orphanage. The sight of all of the children heading to the dining room for breakfast warmed his heart. This place had been the haven for the unwanted for centuries, and he hoped to keep it that way. Marcus and his family was very generous to the orphanage. He hoped that the man could buy out the secret buyer. Hey, Jill, Kendrick greeted. Julia, I guess you want to start helping in the nursery? Jill asked. His wife beamed. I'm excited. I love babies, she said in a bright tone. Great. Kendrick, she's in good hands. You can go, Jill assured. There was no way that his sister would be in a good mood if she knew what was happening. Jill, have you spoken to Leslie? Kendrick cautiously asked. She called this morning. I guess she wants to try and help out more, Jill reported. So Leslie was feeling guilty and wanted to comfort herself by lending a hand. Jill, there's no other way to tell you. James, Leslie, and Finn sold their shares of this building to a buyer. I'm not sure who the buyer was. I'm about to ask Marcus. What? Jill nearly shouted. You can't be serious. Leslie was just here, Kendrick. She wouldn't do something so awful to me. Please tell me you're joking, Jill begged. I'm sorry, Jill. I'm not joking. Leslie told me yesterday. I'm guessing that she wanted me to break the news to you and Sal, Kendrick assumed. This can't be, Jill cried. Why would they take a home away from these children? Because the buyer promised a suitable building for the orphans to live in, Kendrick reported. Suitable? They'll probably provide a shack in the middle of nowhere, Jill bitterly laughed. Kendrick couldn't help but agree with his sister. Something about the word suitable didn't put him at ease. We need to fight to keep this building, Julia softly insisted. I'm open to ideas. I'll see what I can think of, his sister said. I have to start school soon. Come on, Julia, I'll take you to the nursery. Julia followed Jill into the elevator and Kendrick let out a heavy sigh. He would have to speak to Marcus to see what his options were. Julia followed her furious sister-in-law down a tall, wide hallway. She paused in front of one of the doors. This is the nursery. Do you know basic care for children? Jill asked. Yes. Is Layla in here? Anticipation filled Julia's gut at the thought of seeing Layla again. She's a crier, Jill warned. You should take a crack at her. Julia could tell that the poor woman was in over her head. I'm sorry for what Leslie did. Between the three of us, we should be able to figure something out, Julia told her sister-in-law. I guess I should be optimistic, but life hasn't been easy lately, Julia. I hope you're right about the situation. Julia wasn't sure what the outcome would be. She just hated to see a kind-hearted person like Jill give up. The nursery was a colorful room that had cribs placed side by side. One of the babies let out a horrid scream. Julia winced and quickly walked over to the crib. Her eyes fell on little Layla, the malnourished baby that had been dropped off 2 days ago. She lifted Layla and sat in one of 2 rocking chairs. A short blonde entered, a kind smile on her face. "Hi, Julia, I'm Amy. I went to your wedding, but I don't think you saw me," she said as she picked up a baby from the crib and laid the bundle of joy onto a changing table. "Hi," Julia said as she peered down at Layla. Thankfully, the fussy baby had quieted down. Poor Layla reminded Julia of herself. She had been a neglected baby when her aunt got custody. Was she fussy, dirty, and unhappy? "Do you want to feed and change Layla?" Amy inquired. "I'd love to," Julia said as Layla began to fuss. Amy went into a connecting room, which must have been some sort of kitchen, because moments later, she appeared with a bottle of baby formula. Julia accepted the bottle and fed and burped the baby. She even changed Layla's diapers. When the baby fell asleep, Julia moved on to helping another baby. Before she knew it, she had worked through lunch and had to return to the dress shop for her shift. "Helped out at the orphanage?" Shirley asked as soon as Julia entered the store. There were no customers, which was a relief. "Yes, I got to spend time in the nursery," Julia said before Shirley handed Julia the dress that had caught her eye earlier. "Here, this is for you. It's a perk of working here. You can choose one dress a month," she announced. Julia's eyes lit up at the prospect of wearing something so nice. "Really?" she asked. "Really? Come on, try it on," Shirley encouraged. Julia took the dress and headed into one of the dressing rooms. She slipped into the beautiful garment and found that it was a bit loose. It didn't matter, she was keeping it anyway. As if Shirley knew that she had the dress on, she knocked on the dressing room door. Julia opened it and the store owner smiled at her. "That color is perfect for you," the seamstress exclaimed. "I love it," Julia said, amazed at the new life that she was living. If she could, she'd call Ruby to thank her. But Julia was no fool. She knew that her aunt was probably throwing a fit over not having dinner on the table. She didn't feel a little bit sorry for the horrid woman. Julia knew that she would never return to such a life, even if her aunt begged her to. Chapter 10. Meena Carpenter stood at her stove watching the teapot boil. Her mind went to the niece that had defied her and run off. No one knew where Julia had gone. All she had was the state of Florida. Who did Julia know in Florida? She heard the steps of her clueless 15-year-old as she entered the kitchen. The last thing that Meena wanted to do was make breakfast. In fact, if she had her way, she would never have had to deal with children. But her husband Jeff insisted that he wanted a child of his own to pass down his name. The joke was on him. She had managed to birth 2 girls. "Mom, do you need any help?" At least Ruby was trying to be useful. "I'm just making tea. I have a headache. Your father is bringing pizza home." She needed to think fast. They couldn't live on takeout forever. Melissa stormed into the house, tears streaming down her face. "Have you found Julia yet? I want to kill her." Melissa sobbed as she collapsed into a chair. That honestly made both of them, but Meena wasn't going to break that to her daughter. Instead, she poured herself a cup of tea and plopped down into the chair beside her hysterical daughter. I guess she wanted to stop doing your homework for you, Ruby figured. Maybe you chased her away. Shut up! She probably fell for crap on the internet. She's probably cut up in a pond somewhere, Melissa fired back. Ruby's eyes widened in horror. That's a terrible thing to say. Mom, do you think that Julia is dead? Ruby demanded. Something about Ruby's expression made Meena frown. Was that guilt she detected? What did that brat know about her niece's whereabouts? It could be a possibility. She did sound different when she called, but who cares, we have another problem, Meena admitted. What would that be? Ruby squeaked. We need to figure out where to find another maid. We can't afford a traditional cleaner. We need someone that is dependent on us. I thought that Julia only had supervised internet time, Melissa blurted out. I thought so as well. Maybe she met this guy at the store, Meena suggested as Ruby's eyes lowered. That brat knew something. She locked eyes with Melissa, who nodded. Her eldest was the more devious of the two. Ruby was a softie that had an irritating attitude and no backbone. Maybe she used the internet at the library, Ruby suggested. That's it. At the library, you can go on any site that you would like. Patricia would have told me if Julia used a computer at the library. The woman is a gossip and hated how your cousin had an aversion to baths, Meena explained, as Jeff walked through the door, carrying 2 boxes of pizza. What's going on? He asked as he placed the food on the table. Meena glared at her stupid youngest daughter. If she helped Julia escape, she would pay. We're trying to figure out what Ruby knows about Julia's marriage, Meena casually said. Ruby's mouth fell open. I don't know anything. Julia barely talked to me. Melissa had more interaction with her, Ruby shot back. You think she would help Julia escape? Jeff asked, a puzzled expression on his face. She doesn't even want to help herself. Melissa scowled at her father. Impressive that her youngest daughter was actually trying to deflect. That was the oldest trick in the book and wouldn't work. Meena let out a sigh. Ruby, tell us everything you know, and we won't hurt you. Much. Meena purred. Hurt? Ruby asked, confused. You disobeyed your father and me. You also let our servant escape, Meena said. Whatever punishment she concocted, it couldn't be one that left visible scars. She frowned and considered what she could do. But I didn't do anything. Julia ran away and got married, Ruby said, fear in her eyes. Sis, are you willing to put your own skin on the line for someone that isn't even family? Melissa taunted. What? Ruby squeaked. Mom needed help around the house, so she snatched Julia from the hospital when she was 2 days old. Ruby's eyes filled with fury. You monster, she cried. You took a baby from her family? Melissa slapped Ruby, who stopped crying. Instead, she straightened and punched Melissa in the nose. So her youngest did have fight in her. Wasn't that a relief? Enough! Jeff roared when Melissa attempted to make a fist. The poor girl's eye was watering. A trickle of blood was leaking from her nose. Ruby, you better hope that poor sister's nose isn't broken. She shouldn't have hit me, Ruby snapped. That was the truth. Young Ruby could probably wipe the floor with Melissa in a fight. Ruby, Melissa made the story up to see how you would react. Calm down. I got that useless brat legally, Meena said, rolling her eyes. Ruby scowled, obviously hating when her emotions were played with. Julia will be coming back, Jeff announced. I hired a private investigator. I gave them some sob story about how Julia stole your mother's priceless necklace and you want it back. Once we find her, we will be bringing her back. It would seem that her husband can make decisions on his own. Great. How are we going to get her to come back? Ruby challenged. By telling her to come back, Melissa said. Julia has been conditioned to obey commands. By the way, if we find out that you had anything to do with her escape, you will be punished severely. Melissa's cold threat made Meena grin. Kendrick finally got the chance to talk to his boss at around closing time. He didn't relish asking his boss and friend for help, but he knew it had to be done. Sal would react horribly once Jill officially told him. This wasn't going to be pretty. So he walked over to Marcus, who was shutting down his register, and spoke. Hey, man, I'm going to throw this out there. I need your help. Marcus perked up at that announcement. Need me to buy you a horse, a new house, food, clothing, stuff for the orphanage, and... Hey, well, I phrased it wrong, Marcus. Leslie, Finn, and James sold their shares of the orphanage. Well, they sold their shares of the building holding the orphanage. Would you be able to buy out whoever paid them? Kendrick asked, hopefully. Marcus frowned. Who would buy out a building for orphan children? He asked, perplexed. Someone that wants the property for something? I'm not sure how to go about it, he reasoned. How do I find out who bought out my siblings? My mother knows people? Maybe I could ask her, Marcus figured. Maybe. I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess. I just can't afford for the kids to get their home taken away from them. Did the buyers offer to buy your sister another home for the orphanage? Marcus wondered. Yes, Kendrick replied. Yeah, I wonder how small it will be. I can't believe some of the people on this island. Why would your siblings agree to sell? If they needed money, they should have asked you, Sal, and Jill, too, Marcus pointed out. You mean ask you and Thomas to buy them out? Kendrick corrected on a laugh. Hey, manager, I pay you well, Marcus joked. Indeed, Kendrick agreed, feeling grateful that Marcus had taken a chance on him. How is your mail-order bride? Marcus asked. Kendrick couldn't help but let out a chuckle. You'll love this one. Her 15-year-old cousin forged her application. Imagine Julia's surprise when she's woken up in the middle of the night and told she was going to be flown out to her new husband, Kendrick said, and Marcus's eyes widened. I'm surprised she went, Marcus commented. Kendrick relayed the details of his wife's life to his best friend. Then he caught Marcus up on everything that happened. That's a good idea. Make sure that Julia knows that she has choices. She's great, Kendrick gushed. She fits into my life so well. She's offered to help with the nursery and she got a job at Shirley's dress shop. Huh, a woman that works. That is a strange concept. Most of the women are spoiled, Marcus commented. Or entitled, Kendrick added with a wince. I'll see what I can do, man. I hope this all works out. Just make sure that no one else sells, Marcus pleaded. Kendrick knew Marcus was right. That meant that he would have to willingly invite his Aunt Rosa over for dinner. He just had to figure out how he was going to get his wife to agree to it. Chapter 11. The slamming of the front door alerted Julia to Kendrick's arrival. Panic immediately crashed into her heart. Shirley was swamped, so Julia was forced to complete a bit of overtime. She eyed the steaks that were sizzling in the pan and the mashed potatoes that were still cooking, and let out a curse. The asparagus hadn't even been cut yet. A sense of doom encompassed her heart. Julia, Kendrick called, his rich voice reaching her, the tightening of her throat preventing her from responding. Why hadn't I dumped something in the crock pot? She asked herself. It would have been easier. I need to work on my planning and... You mad at me, Julia? Kendrick wondered. Did someone tell you about me inviting Rosa for dinner tomorrow? Her husband's words knocked sense into her. She spun to face him, his kind eyes warming her chest. Sorry, dinner isn't done. I had to... Kendrick wrapped his thick arms around her, his warm embrace chasing away the last of Julia's uncertainty. Her arms tentatively encircled him, hers hesitant due to the fact that she didn't want to ruin the moment. Steak is one of my favorites, Kendrick admitted. I still haven't cooked the asparagus yet, Julia replied. So, we have the steak with mashed potatoes and a salad, Kendrick pointed out. I can make the salad. Why would you do that? Julia wondered. Because I invited Rosa to our house for dinner? I need to do something to get back into my aunt's good graces. Marcus says that he'll help, he just needs to know who the buyer is, Kendrick confessed. What if she doesn't tell us? Julia wondered as she reluctantly pulled away. She had to flip the steak. Kendrick snatched up the asparagus and headed towards the fridge while Julia tended to the meat. I could pretend I want to sell? Kendrick figured. I'm not sure that Rosa will fall for that, but it's worth a try, Julia replied before turning to face her husband, who was slicing a cucumber. Why not? Kendrick asked, an open expression on his face. She kind of reminds me of my Aunt Meena. Women like that can sense a lie a mile away, Julia cautioned. Besides, Leslie will have told her that you don't want to sell. Will you tell her about Marcus? That might help. Maybe I should open with that, Kendrick said. I don't think that's a good idea, she said, a terrible feeling clawing in her stomach. Kendrick sighed. Julia, you know nothing about my Aunt Rosa. Let's drop it. Kendrick wasn't cruel. In fact, the relaxed expression never left his face. But Julia felt unimportant, as if her ideas didn't matter. So much for me having a voice. As long as I have the same opinion as my husband, he'll be willing to hear what I have to say. Julia didn't bother speaking about Rosa. Kendrick knew best and wouldn't need her counsel. Instead, she stirred the mashed potatoes and determined them ready. Do you want cheese or sour cream on your mashed potatoes? I know that Ruby likes them with bacon, but we don't have any. Julia rambled. Bacon and sour cream on mashed potatoes? Kendrick asked as if the thought was blasphemous. I don't eat all that stuff. What kind of dressing do you want? Whatever you're having will be fine, Julia quickly said before putting steak and potatoes on each of their plates and placing them on the table. Kendrick made 2 salads and he put 1 at each setting. Do you want wine? Kendrick wondered. Are you having wine? Julia asked. No, but if you want some, you can have some, Kendrick said as he pulled a bottled water from the fridge. Water will be fine, Julia responded, irritation still nagging at her. Kendrick handed her an ice-cold water, and they had a quiet dinner. Kendrick was surprised when he entered the bedroom to find Julia fast asleep. His shower hadn't been that long. Was his bride upset about Aunt Rosa? She had compared Rosa to her horrible aunt. Kendrick knew Rosa better than that. She was pushy, nosy, and overbearing, but the woman meant well. Kendrick sighed and slipped into bed. Julia was so far from him that she was in danger of plopping onto the hardwood. Lately, they had been exploring the physical side to their relationship. Had the prospect of spending time with cranky Aunt Rosa caused Julia to pull away? Women make no sense, Kendrick complained before closing his eyes and forcing himself to fall asleep. Julia, is it? A woman with waist-length black hair asked as Julia walked into Shirley's dress shop. The woman was tall, thin, and had honey-brown skin. Yes, Julia said as she walked past the woman. After the awkward dinner with Kendrick, she was in no mood for any more conversation. Shirley was ringing up a short blonde. Julia, I'm not done talking to you yet. The woman snapped. Feeling embarrassed, Julia spun to face the beauty. Sorry, Julia replied. I'm Emily Blackhawk, she introduced. I heard that you hemmed the dress that I bought last week. Okay. Seriously, there wasn't much to say to this imposing woman. Look, Mom wanted to know if you have any friends who are going to do this mail-order bride thing, she informed Julia. I have no friends in Jersey, Julia quickly assured the woman. Emily laughed. I can tell. You barely know how to have a conversation. Are all of you like this? Like what? Julia replied. So timid, like a mouse. I mean, you look like you're about to have a heart attack. Relax. I'm just trying to get some information from my dear old mom. Emily joked. You know how people are once they enter their 200s. They start becoming bored and start to gossip. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. I like you. You let me talk as much as I want. Would you like to go to my birthday party? Julia would rather write a 20-page paper about watching paint dry, but this Emily Blackhawk seemed friendly enough. She wasn't as warm as Tessa, but at least she wasn't screaming at her. Oh, I'll have to check with my husband. When is the party? Julia asked. 3 months. Don't you worry, I'll send you a formal invitation in the mail. In fact, I'll invite all of the other brides that came with you. Just to warn you, it will be a ball. You'll have to wear a formal gown. See you then, Emily said before leaving the store. It wasn't until Emily left that it occurred to Julia that Emily Blackhawk didn't have a purchase. Whatever. Maybe she had another dress for Shirley to hem. After the customer that her boss had been ringing up left, Shirley whistled. Julia, we have 5 gowns to work on plus the gown that you will wear to Emily Blackhawk's ball, Shirley said. Julia faced the woman who had a sad expression on her face. I wasn't planning on going to that party, Julia protested. Oh, honey, you will go to that party. No one refuses a Blackhawk, believe me. And besides, Emily waited for 20 minutes for you to arrive. She was planning on inviting you all along. Why? Julia wondered. Don't know, but it can't be good. So I really have to go? Julia squeaked. You do, and I'll help you. It's a good thing that we have 3 months. Chapter 12. Marcus, I need your advice, Kendrick confessed as soon as the last customer left the processing center. What about? His friend wanted to know as he shut down his computer. Julia is upset with me, and I have no idea why, Kendrick confessed. So then ask her, Marcus reasoned. Crap. Did this man know women? One couldn't simply just ask them why they were upset. Are you insane? Kendrick protested. If I ask Julia, she'll just say that everything's all right. By the way, can you go to Asher's surprise wedding? Marcus wondered. I thought that he was already married, Kendrick pointed out. Marcus groaned. Mom wants to make things up to Asher. She approves of Esperanza, Marcus revealed. Throwing someone a surprise wedding sounded controlling to Kendrick. But he wouldn't say so. Marcus would only defend his mother. Any other ideas? Kendrick asked Marcus. Why do you think she's mad? Marcus tried. Because I invited Rosa to dinner on Sunday? Kendrick figured. Then do something nice for her. Maybe you could take her to the beach, Marcus suggested. Maybe. I did buy her a bathing suit the other day. I was going to surprise her with it. What else? Kendrick demanded. Just do something Julia would like, Marcus said, not hiding his exasperation. Julia rushed into her house, the scent of cooking meat reaching her nose. She stumbled into the kitchen and saw Kendrick at the stove. He was wearing a pair of black boxers and nothing else. His magnificent form only made her long to be in his warm arms. So what if he didn't really care about her opinions? Kendrick? Julia hesitantly asked. There you are, Kendrick said. He rushed over to Julia and placed a soft kiss on her mouth. Since you've been working so hard, I decided to make dinner. Her senses were still tingling from the brief touch of his lips. So it took a moment for what Kendrick said to register with her. Thanks? Thank you. Julia stammered, touched by the gesture. Her fingers ached at the thought of cooking. Would you like to go on a date with me? Kendrick suddenly blurted out. Well, technically 2 dates. Tonight I hope we could walk on the beach. But tomorrow there's a barn dance happening. The Grants throw it every year. I never bothered going before, but now that I have such a beautiful wife I can dance with, why not? I don't know how to dance, Julia told her husband. Kendrick smirked. Neither do half the people on the island. We'll do the slow ones. What's the dress code? Julia wondered. That dress Shirley gave you should be acceptable, Kendrick told her, but she was doubtful. Shirley was the best person to go to. After all, her boss was the one who was helping her design her gown for Emily Blackhawk's birthday party. We were invited to Emily Blackhawk's birthday party, Julia suddenly blurted out. It's a ball. How did that happen? Kendrick asked, surprise splashing across his face. I'm not sure. 1 minute I thought that she was insulting me, and the next she was inviting me and the other mail-order brides to this ball, Julia explained. The Blackhawks are one of the richest families on Portum Island. They are just as entitled as the Adams, but make less of a nuisance of themselves. Okay, well, that's something for us to look forward to, Julia grudgingly said. I'm really sorry about Aunt Rosa, sweetheart. I should have talked to you before deciding to invite her over for dinner. Would it have mattered? Julia wondered. Kendrick frowned. Of course it wouldn't matter, Julia. I told you, you have a choice. I won't make any decisions for you, he insisted. As his gentle eyes were boring into hers, Julia came to one conclusion. She was upset that Kendrick hadn't taken her advice. She supposed that it was all based on the fact that she was tired of her voice not being heard. I'm sorry, too, Julia admitted. I hated that you shut me down about Aunt Rosa. It just reminded me of how I was treated back home. Kendrick brushed a kiss to Julia's forehead. Next time tell me when I annoy you, Kendrick instructed. I never want another night like last night. What do you mean? Julia responded. You didn't let me hold you, Kendrick admitted. Julia pulled her husband into her arms and basked in the safety that engulfed her. Then she got up on her tiptoes and pecked his cheek. Okay, then, Julia agreed before pulling away from Kendrick. Are you going to get dressed? Nope, I think I'm going to walk on the beach in my boxers, Kendrick jokingly responded. Julia's eyes grew wide. No, wait, that's a bad idea. I think I'd much rather walk on the beach in my birthday suit. What do you think? I don't like that idea much, Julia admitted. Kendrick chuckled. I prefer to cook in my boxers. Something about it feels freeing, Kendrick admitted. Now sit down, I want to feed my woman. Kendrick set a heaping plate of veggies, sausage, and rice in front of Julia. He followed it up with a glass of fruit punch. After fixing his own plate, Kendrick sat beside her. Thanks for cooking, Julia said before plopping a bite of delicious food into her mouth. No problem, beautiful. You know I like spoiling you, Kendrick teased. Speaking of which, I bought you a bathing suit. I don't know how to swim, Julia said, feeling embarrassed. I'll teach you. Had I gone to a high school in Jersey, I would have been a star swimmer, Kendrick boasted. What else can you do? Julia asked. I love to fish. Marcus, Asher, and I go sometimes. Sometimes I'll take some of the kids from the orphanage. Speaking of which, we'll have to take Damon for the day. After he's adopted, we might not see him again, Kendrick worded. Damon is being adopted? Julia was excited for the rambunctious kid. He is. Jill called me at the processing center to tell me. I think she's a little disappointed, but excited for him. The Grants are going to adopt him, Kendrick explained. The same Grant family that throws the barn dance? Julia wondered. They are indeed, Kendrick confirmed. Are they nice people? Julia was worried that the Grant family would attempt to stifle the spirited boy. They've adopted 5 of our orphans so far. Damon will be in good hands, Kendrick exclaimed. Now I'm more eager to go to the barn dance, Julia confirmed. I want to make sure that Damon is going to a safe home. Why didn't they adopt baby Layla? Damon stole Mary Grant's heart, Kendrick explained, pride showing on his face. Do you want to adopt baby Layla? You seem to visit our line. Joy filled Julia's heart at the thought of making the beautiful baby hers. I'd love to do that. Can we? We'd have to figure out care since I work, but I'll sort something out, Kendrick assured her. And Julia vowed that she would give that baby a better life than what her aunt gave her. After dinner, Kendrick changed into shorts and a t-shirt, and the couple took a walk down to the beach. It was nearly 10, but the beach was light. Julia and Kendrick kicked off their shoes and they began walking on the sand. There were a few small groups congregating a distance from one another. The laughter that reached Julia was a reminder that she wasn't locked in her attic anymore. She had the opportunity to experience life. What is there to do on this island? Julia wondered. Let's see, there are horse races, carnivals, clubs, barn dances, bars, restaurants, a volleyball league, and soccer games, to name a few, Kendrick said. I want to do everything, Julia exclaimed. I never got to have fun before, Kendrick. I want to live my life. Well, this is a good spot, Kendrick said before pausing. A good spot for what? Julia wondered. If we're going to the barn dance, then we need to practice, Kendrick insisted. You mean practice dancing? Julia wondered. Yes, sweetheart, don't worry, I've got you, Kendrick assured. Julia giggled as she released Kendrick's arm in order to face him. He clasped her waist with his warm hands, then began to sing a love song that was unfamiliar. But his deep, rich voice gave Julia tingles. She allowed him to guide her movements. By the end of the song, Julia's cheeks burned from the amount of smiling she did. You have a beautiful voice, she told her husband. It was useful in the orphanage. Some of the kids wouldn't go to sleep unless I sang to them, Kendrick revealed. This man was full of love. Sing me another, Julia insisted. Kendrick sang to his wife as they danced under the stars. At times, Kendrick twirled her, held her, and kissed her lips. Julia sent a thank you into the universe, happy that Ruby had orchestrated the mail-order bride stunt. Chapter 13. Meena paced the sticky floor of her kitchen. She was debating her next move. Her useless husband had actually come up with a good idea for once. It took a day for Jake Reynolds to unearth the phone number for the mail-order bride agency that Ruby had contacted. That little twit had lied straight to Meena's face. But why? What was the purpose of getting Julia married? Ruby was currently at a friend's house, so Meena couldn't confront her. But did she want to? Meena bit her lip, desiring to see the look on Ruby's face after she failed. Meena wanted to crush her daughter's rebellious streak. That meant that she couldn't very well yell at the brat. First, she needed to rehearse the speech that she was going to give to the matchmaker. After an hour of practice, Meena sat down at the kitchen table that was piled with empty takeout containers. Once Julia returned, this house would be spotless. She clicked on the contact card that the PI had texted her and selected the call button. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. "Portum mail-order bride agency." A melodic female voice answered. "How can I help you?" "Good morning. I'd like to speak to Cassandra Hall," Meena said, adding a slight quiver to her voice. "This is Cassandra. How can I help you?" the matchmaker asked. Meena had to quell the desire to rave at that woman for the disaster that befell the Fitzpatrick family, but expressing her true feelings wasn't going to get her anywhere. "Cassandra, my name is Meena. I understand that you have matched Julia Lang," Meena said before sniffling for dramatic effect. "I'm sorry. I don't have Julia's file in front of me, but I recalled that she did mention Amina Fitzpatrick." "Is that you?" Cassandra wanted to know. Damn, Ruby. Now Meena would have to be careful about what she told Cassandra. "It is," Meena confirmed. "Julia stole something of mine. I'm sorry, I would like you to start from the beginning," Cassandra encouraged. Meena smirked, knowing that her act was working. "Well, Julia went to Portum Island with a family heirloom. I was supposed to give it to my daughter, Melissa. She's getting married in a couple of weeks, and we need the necklace," Meena cried. "Please just get it back. I'll pay anything to get it back." "Are you positive that Julia stole it?" Cassandra questioned. "Julia was holding on to it for me. She's responsible. Her apartment is an absolute mess. I can't find anything in it. She doesn't like to clean. I just need the necklace," Meena pleaded. "Do you think that you can give me Julia's address? I can visit her." "I'll reach out to my superiors and figure out a solution," Cassandra insisted before saying her goodbyes and hanging up the phone. Meena hoped that Cassandra's superiors would hand over an address. Cassandra let out a curse, her heart racing a mile a minute. Julia was a thief? Cassandra had her doubts, especially since Leslie had revealed that Kendrick's bride hadn't even filled out her own application. Yet she had still carried on with the wedding. She had either been desperate to escape a bad situation or willing to gain citizenship on Portum Island. Once she became a citizen, she couldn't be deported. Cassandra was startled when the door crashed open and Lance stumbled in, dropping his keys as he walked to his desk. He had a bulging takeout bag in his grip. "Aren't you going to pick up your keys?" Cassandra wondered as Lance placed the bag on his desk and began taking out containers. "The keys can wait, I'm starving." Cassandra chuckled, Lance's antics getting her mind off of the current problem for a moment. "Meena Fitzpatrick called," Cassandra revealed, as Lance handed her a container that had plastic-wrapped utensils on top. "You mean Julia's mean aunt? What did she want? Did you tell the evil woman to dance on hot coals?" Lance asked hopefully. "No, but she seems to have a different side to the story. According to her, Julia stole something." In between bites of rice and chicken, the matchmaker told Lance about the call. "Do you believe her?" her partner asked while his mouth was full of meat. "I don't know. But it isn't for me to believe. If Julia stole, that's against our laws. You don't have to tell the council. They will grant Kendrick an automatic divorce, and then how would it look for us? Not only are we accepting people that have their applications forged, but if it's discovered that Julia has the necklace, then it could be argued that we smuggled thieves onto Portum Island, he argued. What if Julia is innocent and that her Aunt Meena is a terrible woman? What if Julia only went along with her cousin's plan because she had no other means of escape? What if a divorce is what Julia wants? Cassandra challenged. Lance, I went into this business to make a difference. I can't make any woman feel as if she has to get married. Julia doesn't have to leave Portum Island, but she can't go back to New Jersey. You read what Ruby wrote. I don't think it matters much, Lance figured. They are in love, Cassandra. You should have seen them last night dancing on the beach. And if they are in love, they will remarry. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, Lance. The council may not care. There was a fat chance of that happening. Cassandra just had to hope that the council wouldn't dissolve Kendrick's marriage to Julia. You wore it, Shirley cheered as soon as she spotted Julia and Kendrick. They were walking toward a sprawling farm a half-mile away from the orphanage. It was sunset and the farm was teeming with well-dressed people. Despite the fact that this party would take place in a barn, Portum Islanders still wore their Sunday best. Shirley had talked Julia into wearing a knee-high fitted red dress that had a lower back than she was used to. Kendrick, who was wearing khakis, a button-down, and a tie, grinned at Shirley. So you're the one to blame for the fights I'm going to get into tonight? Kendrick teased. Shirley rolled her eyes. As soon as you understand that looking isn't a crime, you won't get yourself beat up. The dressmaker teased. Shirley, I love your dress, Julia complimented. The silk dress was lovely indeed, the baby blue color suiting her quite nicely. Thank you, Shirley said before striking a pose. Julia giggled while Kendrick shook his head. You're such a diva, Shirls, Kendrick complained. Of course I am. Why didn't you bring any of the kids around? Shirley wondered. Because Mrs. Lawson is doing one of her etiquette lessons, Kendrick responded. Shirley's sour expression made Kendrick laugh. Oh, stop it. Her lessons weren't so bad. She always gave us a lot of food when I had to attend the classes. That hasn't changed, but... Kendrick, a tall, blond man greeted. Moments later, the man wrapped an arm around Shirley, who giggled. Lester Adams, Kendrick hissed. Shirley shot Kendrick a pleading look. Julia recalled the name from one of the stories that Kendrick told. Kendrick, it's nice to see you, Lester said, a genuine smile on his face. Julia was trying to see if there was any malice in his expression. He was probably a good actor. Why are you here, Lester? Last I checked, you and Brittany Graham broke up? Kendrick pointed out, which made Shirley stiffen. Hey, stop with that, man. We're only here to have a good time. Shirley asked me to the dance, and I thought, why not? Kendrick glanced at Shirley in a way that told Julia that he would be talking to her later. Come on, Lester. Let's get a good table, Shirley said before dragging the man away. Kendrick led Julia inside what was supposed to be a barn. The place had been renovated years ago. Now it looked like a functional hall, complete with a dance floor, a buffet, rows of tables, and a chandelier. Kendrick eyed his surroundings and spotted a table with Shirley and Lester. His heart clenched at the sight of those two laughing and joking. Shirley was like a little sister to him. How could she betray Kendrick in such a way? Julia gently squeezed Kendrick's hand and he glanced down at her. She chose to ask him to the dance, Ken, his wife pointed out. It will be okay. Kendrick, Julia, over here, Leslie shouted. Kendrick groaned but figured that he might as well deal with Leslie and her lazy husband, Garrett. Julia shot Kendrick an encouraging smile that warmed him from the inside out. They walked over to Leslie, who was gesturing at the two empty seats at her table. Oddly enough, Councilman Terrace and his wife Bethany were also dining with his sister. Hi, Councilman Terrace, Bethany. It's nice to see you both. I'm Kendrick, and this is my wife, Julia. Kendrick introduced. The councilman looked uncomfortable, as if he'd rather not be talking to Kendrick, but his beautiful wife grinned. Hi, Julia. Welcome to Portum Island. How do you like it here? Bethany wondered. It's lovely, Julia said as she took a seat. I'm sure it's a lot better than an attic, Leslie blurted out. Kendrick wanted to curse his sister out, but Julia laughed and nodded. Well, I'm just so excited to attend my first barn dance, Julia said. What did Leslie mean by the attic comment? Councilman Terrace inquired, which made Bethany shake her head. Dear, I believe that it's an inside joke, the councilman's wife delicately said. I'm sure it's not, Beth. Why else would Leslie have mentioned it to her while we were sitting here? Councilman Terrace argued. Sweetheart, let's get some food, Kendrick told his wife. She nodded and followed him to the buffet. Chapter 14. Julia's eyes lit up upon spotting the wide selection. It was unfortunate that she didn't have the stomach to try it all. The disappointment must have shown on her face because Kendrick spoke. Why don't we each get different things? Then we can share, he offered. Julia smiled, loading her plate with chicken, pigs in a blanket, 2 casseroles, cheesy bread, a kebab, and rice with beans. Kendrick was certain to grab a sample of anything that Julia didn't have on her plate. Why do you always ask awkward questions, Leo? Bethany Terrace demanded. Julia ignored the couple and reclaimed her seat. Leslie frowned at the amount of food on Julia's plate. You're going to gain a lot of weight eating like that, Leslie said. Councilman Terrace eyed Julia's plate and nodded with approval. Finally, a woman who knows how to eat. Kendrick, if I were you, I'd keep this one, Councilman Terrace said. Leslie blushed when Leo's attention fell on her. I mean, you're so skinny I can count your ribs. Garrett, do you ever feed her? Because he is lazy? Kendrick blurted out, and Julia gently kicked him under the table, which only made her husband laugh harder. The last thing she wanted was Leslie doing something to sabotage Kendrick's efforts. Funny, Leslie huffed. It's okay, though. With my share, Garrett and I are buying a house. Garrett abruptly stood and headed toward the food table. It would seem that he wasn't interested in defending his bride. Want to try this? Kendrick asked, holding out a wonton to Julia. She gestured to her own plate, and Kendrick took a bite out of the kebab. Julia tried the wonton, which was stuffed with buffalo chicken, and her taste buds exploded with joy. The couple carried on like that, sampling each other's food, while Leslie, arguing with Councilman Terrace, served as background noise. Eventually, Bethany got to her feet and fetched a plate of food for her and her husband. Julia couldn't help but notice that Garrett never returned. Where had he gone? Something about Garrett didn't seem right. But Julia's attention was stolen at the sudden blast of music. The beginnings of the Cupid Shuffle reached Julia's ears. She had remembered Melissa telling her about prom and that they played that dance to get the kids moving. She had said that the song was outdated, but Ruby said that it was the classic, like something called the Electric Slide. But Julia had researched both dances on one of the rare times that she had access to a computer. She had longed to dance among a group of people. It looked like she was going to have her chance. Come on, Kendrick, Julia squealed as she got to her feet. She abandoned her half-full plate in order to go on the dance floor, Kendrick on her heels. She did all of the cliché line dances that people her age groaned at, Kendrick laughing beside her. By the time 6 songs had been played, most of the partygoers were on the dance floor. Bodies spun, twirled, stomped, and bumped, while some, unfortunately, grinded. But the overall atmosphere was thrilling. After the fast-paced songs, Kendrick took Julia's hands and walked her over to the drink station. She happily accepted a glass of rum punch and gulped it down. "Not so fast, woman," Kendrick shouted. "You're gonna get yourself drunk." Julia giggled, amused by the prospect. But to be on the safe side, she settled for only having 1 glass of punch. "Come on," she insisted. "Let's dance." Kendrick held Julia as a slow song played. They had been dancing for hours, their bodies close. A hunger to have all of Kendrick filled Julia. He was exciting, sweet, thoughtful, and every time he was away from her, she anticipated their reunion. Julia tilted her head up and her eyes locked with his. The song ended and Kendrick's lips descended on hers. Their kiss was long and hot, their tongues tangling. A tap on Julia's back pulled her away from the kiss. She reluctantly pulled away from Kendrick and turned to see an agitated Leslie standing there. While Julia was dripping in sweat from dancing, Leslie appeared untouched by the party. Her ice blue eyes were filled with so much annoyance that it stunned Julia into silence. The music suddenly lowered in volume, the sign that this dance was coming to an end. "Glad that you're having fun," Leslie huffed. "So nice that you just left me there with Councilman Terror so that you can make love to my brother on the dance floor," she accused. Leslie was definitely over-exaggerating, but Julia was in no mood to argue. The joy, excitement, and high was still warming her inside. "Leslie," Kendrick said, his tone confused. "What's up?" "What's up is that you forgot all about me. It's like you were more concerned about a perfect stranger. I can't believe that you did that to me. You left me all alone. Garrett ditched me, and you didn't even care." "Are you forgetting that you screwed me over?" Kendrick shouted. "You're lucky that I even sat with you. What do you expect me to do, pretend it's okay that a bunch of children are going to be homeless?" "The buyer will provide suitable accommodations for them, Kendrick," Leslie spat. "Right, because the rich people on the island provide suitable things to the orphans. Wake up, Leslie. Your husband is too lazy to get a job, so you wanted a cut of the orphanage. You're greedy and selfish. Leslie slapped Kendrick across the face, a few gasps filling the air. Fury filled Julia at the sight of her husband being assaulted. She stepped forward, rage pouring into her limbs. She raised her fist and punched Leslie right in the nose. The impact caused blood to immediately gush from Leslie's nose. The dramatic woman began crying, but Julia didn't feel too badly. She had always watched as Aunt Meena slapped, punched, and tossed food in Uncle Jeff's face without a thought, since the man would never hit her back. She had seen that same knowledge in Leslie's eyes before that hateful woman slapped Kendrick. Julia was turning over a new leaf. She was never going to stand for injustices ever again. "Why don't we go?" Kendrick suggested. "Sounds good," Julia agreed. Julia was disappointed. Kendrick hadn't said a word since he had suggested that they leave the barn dance. He went into the bathroom and showered, leaving her to stew in her uncertainty. When he exited the bathroom, he was dressed in his sleep shorts and nothing else. Julia couldn't appreciate the view since he plopped down in bed. After showering, Julia brushed her teeth and took care to floss. She would have to make an appointment with a dentist and a primary care doctor to ensure that she was perfectly healthy. That was one more thing that Aunt Meena had deprived her of. Shaking off the thought of her spiteful aunt, Julia walked into the bedroom. Kendrick was fast asleep, which caused a pang to fill Julia's chest. "He's so perfect," she thought to herself. After switching off the light, Julia crawled into bed beside her husband. She kissed his forehead, wishing that she could actually figure out what went wrong. They had a blast at the barn dance and tried so many different foods. Kendrick and Julia had danced on the beach the night before. Now it felt like there were a million miles between them. Sweetheart, I can hear you thinking from here, Kendrick grumbled. Julia touched his face in the spot where Leslie had struck him. Are you all right? Julia wanted to know. Leslie was supposed to be rich, you know, Kendrick explained. What do you mean? Julia wondered. She had a feeling that Kendrick was going to justify her behavior with a sob story, but she would listen to it since it was better than the alternative. Leslie's mother is Gretchen Adams, Lester Adams' cousin. She was 15 when she became pregnant with Leslie. Her mother demanded that she give up the baby, but Gretchen didn't take no for an answer. She would visit Leslie and promised her everything. The story was the same. Gretchen promised Leslie that once she got married, she would take Leslie away from everything. This went on until Leslie was 10 years old. Gretchen married Mark Blackhawk, who didn't accept Leslie. You know how it is. He made it Leslie's fault. The bastard said that Leslie was too difficult and was not classy enough to fit in with his high society family. So Gretchen allowed my parents to adopt Leslie. Now I understand why she took her share. Leslie always hungered for a privileged life because it was promised to her. I guess it took me this long to figure everything out, Kendrick said. I love you, Kendrick, Julia softly said. I love you too, Julia. No, go to bed, Kendrick said before pulling her into his arms. Julia closed her eyes, her body relaxing. She had no idea who she was and what her hobbies would be. She didn't know if she preferred dances, plays, or watching movies at a theater. But what she did know was that Kendrick had stolen her heart. Chapter 15. This is an interesting choice, Tessa said as she eyed the hot dog buns on the table. Julia pulled the hamburgers out of the oven and placed them on the counter. I wanted to do a cookout type thing, but none of us own a grill, so I figured that this would be casual enough, Julia explained. Tessa giggled before taking a swig of her bottled water. Hey, I love burgers, hot dogs, potato salad, and brownies. I won't protest. I'm just wondering why you wanted us with you? It isn't like Rosa and I hit it off when we met, Tessa pointed out. After last night, I'm convinced that this is the best idea, Julia said as Kendrick rushed into the house, a bouquet of pink roses in his grip. He eyed Julia, the food, and Tessa, and then chuckled. Is this your way of protesting? Kendrick wondered. Thomas is waiting for you in the living room, Julia announced as she took the flowers from her husband. And thank you for the flowers. Kendrick grinned and brushed a kiss to her lips. This might be the best idea, Kendrick reluctantly agreed, before placing the flowers on a vase that was in the middle of the kitchen table. I'm glad someone thinks that Thomas could defuse a situation, Tessa sighed. Woman, you are in love with Tom. All of the complaining is just you talking crap, Kendrick teased before leaving the room. Tessa let out a sigh. Be glad that your sister-in-law didn't try to move in with you, Tessa said. Since I punched my sister-in-law in the face, that wouldn't be viable, Julia grumbled. Tessa whistled. Damn! I wish that I were there to see that. Julia, you are coming into your own. I tell you, it's always the quiet one, Tessa teased. When the doorbell rang, Julia's friend rolled her eyes. It was obvious that Rosa had arrived. It's unlocked, Julia shouted, but that didn't seem to be enough for the woman. She kept on ringing the bell. Julia grudgingly opened the door and let out a breath. Rosa was standing on the porch with a grinning Lester Adams. "What's this?" Julia asked, confused. "Let us in, Julia. I know you lived in an attic, but I assumed that you were house-trained," Rosa snapped. Would it be ethical if Julia punched this lady in the mouth? Since Kendrick wanted answers, she stepped aside and led the guests into the kitchen. "Barbecue food?" Lester asked with interest. Tessa shot Julia a confused expression. "There are ribs in the crock pot," Tessa announced. "I brought them over." "Kendrick, you come in here. You invited me over for dinner. You should not keep me waiting," Rosa snapped. Moments later, Thomas and Kendrick entered the room, Kendrick's eyes immediately flaring with anger. "You are the buyer?" Kendrick asked Lester, who looked utterly confused. "Buyer? Buyer of what?" Lester asked, stunned. Rosa let out a sigh. "Kendrick, dear, if you were interested in selling your share of the orphanage, why didn't you tell me?" Rosa asked, annoyed. "It would have saved the effort it takes for me to walk down here. I'm not getting any younger." "Rosa, who's the buyer?" "You know that I won't tell you unless you sign the form saying that you agree to sell. The buyer doesn't want to be harassed by Jill or Sal," Rosa insisted. "Wait, why would anyone want to buy out a building for an orphanage? Where would the children go? Does Shirley know about this? Did the council approve of this? I'm confused. Rosa, you told me this would be a chance for me to apologize to Kendrick. He really needs a haircut, and he's been avoiding my brother's barber shop." Rosa sighed. "This isn't going to get anywhere, so I'm going to be frank. Lester wants to marry Shirley, but Shirley doesn't want to marry him because she knows that you will be upset. Kendrick, now Lester will be the perfect man for Shirley because I'll believe that he actually wants to marry Shirley when I see the wedding ceremony performed," Kendrick interrupted. "Now, Rosa, who is the buyer, and why won't you tell me?" "Because if I do, I lose my chance to be bought out. That kind of money is enticing," she said. "Tom, I forgot something at home," Tessa said before rushing out of the house. Thomas let out a groan. "Of course Tessa forgot something. The woman is never organized." "Now, Rosa, how much will it take to buy out the buyer?" Thomas inquired. "It will take $90 million, Rosa supplied. "Makes no sense. I don't even think that the building is worth that much." "I can't ask Marcus to pay that," Kendrick realized, a defeated expression across his face. "He will, but that's nearly everything he owns." Thomas nodded in agreement. "Marcus Lawson is a great man and would pay that money in a heartbeat." Julia had to do something to save the orphanage. But what could she do? That amount of money was inconceivable to someone like her. Lester let out a whistle. "I don't even have that kind of money. I only have $6 million in my account. Shirley is going to be devastated," Lester complained. "I'm surprised that you care," Kendrick muttered. Tessa rushed back into the room, a wide grin on her face. "Good news, folks. My Aunt Gwen really wants her great-niece or nephew to go to Eleanor Prep," Tessa said. "Since she is worth a ton, she can buy this buyer out. Where will she sign?" "Tessa, where the hell is Eleanor Prep?" Thomas slowly demanded. "A boarding school that I couldn't get into, but since you are a genius, I'm sure that one of our children will make it," Tessa said. No one missed Tessa's wince. "It's too risky," Kendrick said. "I'm going to have a talk with Jill." Before Julia could even reach out to Kendrick, he made his exit. Kendrick stormed into the lobby and noticed Jill sitting behind the reception desk. Molly must have asked for the night off. That was probably why his sister was still there. "Hey, Jill," Kendrick greeted. "How are you?" "The kids are all at camp and Diana Adams is sitting with the newborn, so I suppose that everything is all right. Why do you look so miserable?" "If I ask Marcus to pay off the buyer, it will cost him $90 million. I could never do that, Jill. That would be most of his savings. Tessa went to her aunt about the issue, and her aunt had steep conditions that could expose the island. No citizen should live outside of Portum Island before the age of 25. You know what can happen," Kendrick said. "Loss of longevity." Jill whispered, a sad expression on her face. "The only thing I can think to do is sell, then put our money into building something even better," Kendrick decided. Tears began running down Jill's face, and it nearly broke Kendrick's heart. "This is all we had left of them," she said, her voice quivering. Kendrick's eyes filled and Jill went into his arms. She sobbed so violently that her body shook. Kendrick held on, her body quivering. He held her because he knew exactly how his sister felt. Chapter 16. Julia walked into the lobby of the orphanage with 2 pans wrapped in tin foil. After providing her guests with food, she had decided to follow Kendrick. They were supposed to be a team. She watched as Jill blew her nose, her eyes just as red-rimmed as Kendrick's. The two had been crying together. Sal hovered by the elevator, pain etched in his features. Julia hated to see Kendrick hurting, but what could she do about it? It wasn't like she had $90 million lying around. Even if she sewed dresses for thousands of years, Julia could never amass that kind of fortune. She walked over to the reception desk and put down her burden. Then Julia piled Kendrick into her arms. He held her close, his face buried in her hair. "Some crap. I don't understand why anyone would want to buy this place," Sal complained. "Why can't we hold out?" "The majority rules," Jill said. "They will take half of this building and transform it into whatever business they want." "Mom should have left nothing to Leslie. The scheme stinks of her," Sal complained. "Agreed," Jill said. "But they loved her, just like she loved them. Besides, she wasn't the only one that sold out," Jill reminded them. Kendrick began playing with Julia's hair as if it gave him some kind of comfort. Suddenly, the door banged open, startling the group. Julia pulled away from Kendrick, expecting to see another baby dumped at the orphanage. Instead, she saw an uncomfortable Councilman Terrace, along with a tall, beefy guy in a yellow outfit. He had a badge and a gun in a holster, which made her deduce that he was some kind of officer. "Junior, what are you doing here?" Jill asked. "We've come for Julia Carter. She's been accused of stealing a prized family heirloom," Councilman Terrace grudgingly admitted. It was obvious that he drew the short straw. Julia couldn't say that she was all that surprised by the news. Her Aunt Meena had a hand in all of this. She was positive. It didn't mean that she wasn't about to freak out. "She didn't steal anything, Junior," Kendrick defended. Junior looked bored. "I don't think that Meena even has any family heirlooms. She just wants me kicked off the island so that I can be her slave," Julia argued. "She filed the necessary police report, Julia. That means that you have to return to New Jersey to face the charges," Junior said. "Dana has agreed to take you back home." "No?" Julia protested. "You can't be serious." "I'm coming too," Kendrick announced. "I'm not letting her face them alone." "Ken, you don't have an immunity to the boundary," Jill said, a sad expression on her face. "You'll be sick for days." "I don't care. I'm not losing her," Kendrick pleaded. "So that means that you both want to be married?" Councilman Terrace asked, hope in his eyes. "Yes," Julia and Kendrick responded in unison. "Cassandra received a report that Julia's cousin signed Julia up for the mail-order bride service," Councilman Terrace explained. "Leslie," Jill hissed. "I can't believe she said something even after Julia said that she was okay with marrying Kendrick." "Well, that's settled, Julia. Once you are cleared, you can freely come back to the island," Councilman Terrace announced. "I didn't steal anything," Julia protested. "I only came here with a duffel bag." "Apparently your cousin Melissa needs a necklace for her wedding. Just give it back, and we'll be more than happy to let you come back to the island," Councilman Terrace bargained. Julia flung herself into Kendrick's arms, tears filling her eyes. He held her close, his grip tight. She didn't want to let go. It hurt to let go. But Julia had to be strong and face her aunt on her own. She tilted her face up and Kendrick's warm lips crashed into hers. Her fingers tangled in his hair as their mouths moved with such passion that had they been alone, they would have made love. Julia kissed him until the throat cleared. "Time to go, Julia," Councilman Terrace said. Julia pulled away and gave Kendrick one final kiss on the cheek. "I love you," he told her. "I love you too," Julia responded, before following Junior and Councilman Terrace out into the darkening night. Kendrick sat on the edge of his bed, unable to sleep. It felt like Julia was a million miles away. She landed in New Jersey. That was according to Dana, who felt it necessary to give him a play-by-play. For the first time in his life, Kendrick resented the fact that he couldn't leave the island. Julia needed him. What would happen if she were left to sleep in that attic again? No, that wouldn't happen. Dana assured him that Julia would never spend another night in that house. Cursing, Kendrick decided that it was best that he went to sleep. He had work in the morning. "How are you?" Leslie asked. Kendrick was in no mood to be nice. In fact, he had no idea why his sister was at his station. "Did you come by to slap me again?" Kendrick taunted. "No, but I'm sorry about that. I was just angry. Aunt Rosa told me that you wanted to know who the buyer was. I guess you hoped I'm buying them out?" Leslie wanted to know. "Talk to Jill about this," Kendrick bluntly said. "I'm not in the mood to talk about the orphanage. So why did you tell Cassandra that Ruby is the one that filled out Julia's application?" Leslie sighed. "Because I thought that Julia was using you. Despite what you think, you're still my brother," Leslie said as the last customer left the center. All Kendrick wanted to do was go home and call Dana. The first thing he was going to do for Julia was buy her a cell phone. "No, you just didn't want me to be happy. Since things are crap with Garrett, you think that everyone should have a bad relationship. I see through you, Leslie. So why don't you just take your millions and swim in them?" Kendrick shot out. Leslie paled. Thomas picked that moment to stroll into the center. He frowned when he spotted Leslie standing in front of Kendrick's station. "I gotta go, Leslie," Kendrick said. His sister, never liking to be ignored, rolled her eyes. "Where? You no longer have a wife to go back to," she hotly responded. "Mrs. Williams," Thomas greeted as he invaded Leslie's personal space. "It's Leslie," Leslie snapped. "Kendrick, I figured out who the buyer is," Thomas announced. It took some research, but I've found the information. It doesn't matter, man. I won't be able to buy them out, Kendrick said. Leslie was manipulated by revenge. So, what happened was that Gretchen Blackhawk did apply to adopt Leslie. But the adoption was unfavorable since Leslie would have been sent off the island as a teen. Her stepfather had no interest in having her around, so that's the agreement that Gretchen and her husband came to. It was even memorialized in the prenup. Anyway, your parents, God rest their souls, argued that Leslie should be in a loving home. They were concerned that if Leslie were sent off the island too soon, her lifespan would be shortened. Gretchen was furious with the decision, but her husband forbade her from seeing Leslie. So, fast forward 25 years, Leslie gets dirt on Mark Blackhawk. She blackmails him into buying the building. She blames her parents for the adoption not going through. Thomas explained. What kind of dirt would actually make a millionaire fork over millions of dollars? Marcus wondered. Thomas shook his head. That information was not in any of the documents and emails I have reviewed. So this is good news for you, Kendrick. The contract is invalid due to the blackmail clause written in our Constitution, Thomas happily said. Leslie glared at Thomas. Good luck getting Mark Blackhawk to reveal what I've got on him, Leslie snorts. I already turned the information into the council. The agreement has been nullified. Kendrick sent his friend a smile, but inside he still felt hollow. This victory would have been sweeter had his wife been there. But at least Jill wouldn't have to lose her home. What about the people that already received money for selling their share to the building? Marcus wondered. Don't know. It isn't my case. And just to let you know, Mrs. Williams, you might do time, Thomas warned. It doesn't pay to be vengeful. Leslie promptly ran out of the processing center. You lied to her, Marcus accused. An officer is waiting for her outside. I just didn't want her to get arrested in front of Kendrick, Thomas admitted. A man can only take so much. Chapter 17. Julia scowled at the small, drab home where she was once held prisoner. 2 hired security guards stood behind her, in case Meena decided to get physical. Julia was positive that her aunt wouldn't try anything in front of an audience. Dana and Julia had spent the night in a hotel by the airport. They had driven down to the police station bright and early the next morning, just to discover that the police report was a fake. That was when Julia decided that she had enough. I'm going to get this over with, Julia said before climbing the rickety front steps. She rang the doorbell since she had never been permitted to have a house key. The door flew open and a relieved Meena stood on the other side. Her relief quickly turned to smugness until she noticed the security guards. She opened the door and Julia forced herself to enter the house where she had been trapped for many years. The hired muscle actually followed behind her. Julia's eyes bulged when she beheld the kitchen. There were trash bags filled to the rim with trash, takeout containers on the table, and dishes stacked in the sink. Flies had already made a home in the house, and Julia suspected that mice would join the insects shortly. Are these men here to ensure that you won't leave again? You have a lot of work to do, Aunt Meena snapped. The police report was a fake, Meena. That means that I get to go back home. In fact, the jet is waiting for me, Julia said. Meena scowled. I was told that if I sent them a police report, you would be returned to Jersey, she huffed. Why are you so lazy? Why did you do this to me? Didn't you love my parents? How do you think treating me like this would make them feel? Julia demanded. First of all, your mother was a brat who always got what she wanted, including my boyfriend. My parents loved her. She was the perfect one, the successful one. All her success got her was into an early grave. Meena ranted. And seriously, I did you a favor. Look at you now, married, healthy, and put together. You didn't turn out half bad. Either hire a maid or learn how to clean, Julia shouted. If you leave, I'll make Ruby do the cleaning. She helped you. She will be punished, Meena threatened. Though Julia felt guilty, she couldn't confine herself to a life in the attic. She loved Kendrick too much to leave him behind. I hope you don't do that. But if you do, you'll lose Ruby too, Julia said, and that loss would hurt more, since she is your daughter. Meena rolled her eyes. You are too much like your mother, a selfish and love-struck. Go live with your husband and have your pretty babies. Just know that Ruby will grow into an old maid, she taunted. Julia made a promise to herself. As soon as Ruby turned 18, she would find a way to get her on Portum Island. Julia had lived in servitude for her entire life. She was certain that Ruby could last 3 years. The thought made her queasy, but she knew that there was nothing that could be done. Goodbye, Meena. I hope I never have to see you again. It was evening by the time Julia made her way to her home. She had wanted to surprise Kendrick and so hadn't told him about the results of her trip. She walked up the porch steps and rang the bell. Julia hadn't been permitted to take anything from the island when Junior had come for her. Dana had been kind enough to purchase a few things for her at a local Walmart after they landed. The carry-on full of what she used when she was in Jersey rested at her feet. The door opened and Julia squealed before launching herself at Kendrick. He caught her and carried her into the house. The door was pulled shut and Kendrick was moving toward the stairs. Julia's mouth was on Kendrick's neck, her kisses warm and hot. I love you, Julia, Kendrick said. I love you too, Julia murmured in between kisses. The police report was a fake. I knew it was, Kendrick told her as they entered their bedroom. Kendrick deposited Julia on the bed and she glanced up into his beautiful face. Kendrick, make love to me, Julia said, her voice strong and sure. Kendrick was more than happy to comply. Epilogue. 6 months later. Congratulations, Jill sang as soon as Julia walked into the orphanage, her belly leading the way. Thanks, Julia said as she approached the receptionist's desk. Where's Molly? Picking the younger kids up from school. I really have Liz to thank for scolding the locals, Jill laughed. Where's Layla? Julia wondered. At the doctor's office for her last checkup? Since you passed your parenting course, you will get her for weekend visits. Jill grinned. This new adoption process was long but necessary. Jill had an issue with people promptly returning difficult kids. Hell, the Grants had wanted to give Damon away at one point. It was only through Kendrick's intervention that they were a happy family. I also have some unpleasant news. What would that be? Julia wondered. We now know the dirt that Leslie had on Mark Blackhawk. What would that be? Julia wondered again. He was trying to protect his sister Lily's honor. When Lily was 15, she went into seclusion. She had a baby that was dumped at the orphanage. That baby was me, Jill revealed. Leslie knew who my birth parents were and never told me. I'm so sorry, honey, Julia said, her heart going out to Jill. At least I know, Jill said. But Julia knew that her sister was hurting on the inside. In time, Jill would heal and her smile would reach her eyes again. She just needed time. The end. This has been Julia, Bride's Dock on Portum Island, Book 3, written by Debbie Civil, narrated by Bethany Kay. Copyright 2020 by Debbie Civil. Production copyright by Debbie Civil.